All right, you made it back here to the Gill Athletics Connections Podcast, Season 7. We're still just pumping out some amazing guests here as we are entering our seventh season of the podcast, which still is just quite amazing to me. I'm so humbled to be your host, Mike Cunningham, also known as the national, I don't know, what is my title? Business development manager or something like that. Most people just know me as the podcast guy. A lot of people call me the Gil. I think some people think my name is Gil, which is not the worst thing in the world. That's actually, if you know who our founder, Harry Gill, was way back in the day, that's a pretty good compliment. But, most people just call me Mike, just like our guest today. So let's get into it. This is going to be a lot of fun. I've known this coach for quite a while at different stops. So I'm pumped to talk about that. But I actually don't know kind of the core background of her. So I'm super excited to learn that. And I think you will be too. Help me welcome the new head coach of the University of Texas, El Paso, the great UTEP out there. Help me welcome the wise and wonderful Miss Francesca Green. Francesca, how are you?
Oh, I am amazing. How are you?
Dude, I love when someone says they're amazing. Like that's how you know. Like it makes me think of a mutual friend of ours, Lonnie Green.
Oh
I
my
was just
God.
I
Yes.
just introduced him to some of our team at the USTFCA convention. I go, here's my favorite thing about Lonnie. Every time, and I'm talking about this goes back a long time now. Every time, Lonnie, how you doing? Oh, I'm blessed. Oh
Yep.
my, and I'm like, it's like
Time.
I asked him one time. I was like, so what? Like we're not always good. Some bad things happen to good people, right? Sometimes we have bad
Absolutely.
days. And he goes, yeah, he goes, I absolutely do. He goes, but you know what? I woke up today. I get to work with young kids in track. I'm
Yep.
blessed. And I was like, dang. I
Yep.
was
He is
like,
one of my favorite people. And that is
yeah,
absolutely every time I see him, hey, Green, we got the same last name. So,
that's right.
I have no choice but to try to have that Lonnie Green energy. And yes, we both are very, very blessed. So yes, I am amazing.
We can all have that energy. That's for sure.
Yep.
I love it. I love it.
Absolutely.
And he's the kind of guy when you don't have that energy, when it is a bad day, boy, he'll lift you up, man. So I love Lonnie Green. Love him, love him. Gill podcast alum as well, by the way, guys. So if you are interested in learning more about Lonnie, just look in the same app you're using now. Just search his name; it'll pop right up. He's a cool dude. But we're talking about another cool dudette here, Francesca. Man, Francesca, I'm really good at keeping the timeline, but I kind of want to jump ahead here.
Sure.
New head coach at UTEP. Congratulations.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. I am super, super excited, very, very humbled and just excited for this opportunity. It is an absolutely amazing place with such deep history, tradition. I got big shoes to fill, that's for sure, but very, very excited and blessed to be here.
And when we're recording this, you're still in your first semester, if you will, there. Have you learned like even how to get to the office and where to go grocery shopping, where your house apartment is? You still figuring that out, or are you kind of in your routine by now?
I'm in a little bit more of a routine. We're probably what 3, 4 months in now, and I've been able to find a place to live, have a house, got the fam and everybody moved. I am now comfortable not using my GPS. I felt like even if I was going around the corner, I was putting on, my maps like, okay, don't get lost, figuring out a new place. But I do think I now feel pretty comfortable getting to most places. So yeah, I'm settling in quite nicely.
I still it's only slightly a joke. I'll say I typically still need my GPS to get home, and I've been here 20 years for crying out loud.
Exactly.
But that's because I'm terrible at directions and driving and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How big is, and we'll learn more about UTEP when we get to that point. But I'm just curious, just thinking about you using maps to go around the corner. I've actually never been to El Paso. How big is it? And maybe
Sure.
we've both been to Tucson, right? So I understand how big Tucson is, things like that. How big is El Paso?
Well, believe it or not, it's pretty similar to Tucson.
Hmm.
They're in the city of El Paso. You might see maybe more a million or so
Oh
that
wow, okay.
are within El Paso, maybe a little bit more than that.
Mhm.
And then when you factor in Juarez, Mexico, that's pretty close.
Mhm.
You're looking at maybe 3 million. So it really is a big city
Yeah.
itself, but it has still that small town feel,
Hmm.
which is pretty similar to Tucson, which is I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah. Been to Tucson a few times, and I would agree with that. It is a big
Yeah.
city,
Yeah.
but it always does feel like it's a nice little town or something like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how many students at UTEP?
We have roughly, I want to say there's a high 20s,
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
28,000,
Oh yeah.
a little under 30. But looking, I know they're looking to increase that. They've had quite a few new changes within the majors that they offer here, and I'm trying to get more students. It's pretty neat. Most, probably over 50% of the student population here are first generation students that have gone to college for the first time, and the campus is considered a commuter campus, so
Mhm.
quite a few people will commute into campus, and so that part of it also is pretty interesting to learn uh,
Yeah.
about as well.
I love that. And, I'm putting you on the spot asking about stats and stuff. And I was like, well, she's only been there 4 months. I got to be a little careful.
I'm
You
learning.
learn these things, right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, Francesca, that's awesome. We'll learn more as we get there. Let's get in our Wayback Machine here. Assuming, and that no assumption, I do know you were an athlete, that you were an athlete in track and field. Where in the world does track start for you?
Oh man. Okay, so I've been running track since I was 8 years old. I've been doing it a very, very long time. Um, how I got into it, as a kid, I had a lot of energy.
Hmm.
And then me and my older brother, I was kind of a bit of a tomboy growing up. So me and my older brother, we were in the streets a lot as kids, playing in ponds and, ripping and running through the neighborhood. Wherever he went, I went. And so, one of the things we used to do, and I've told a few people this story, but one of the things we used to do a lot is I would hustle his friends for money, because they always wanted to race me. I was fast, and so they always thought they could beat me. And so I'm like, all right, well, let's go. Me, you, here to the fence. Let's see who wins. And I'd make a buck or two. And so we kind of did that for a little bit. And that's when I kind of really realized, like, oh, okay, I'm actually I'm kind of good at this.
Huh.
And so at 8, my mom put me in track and field for the first time over the summer. And that's when I really started to kind of grow this love for something that I didn't know that I had. And so not only hustling for money, but running as a young kid at the age of 8, and then getting into middle school track and high school track, and I was pretty good. I was one of the best in the state, and even over the summer, I was pretty good. So I
Why?
traveled a lot over the summer for track.
Why track and field and I'm gonna say in not, but maybe it also included this soccer, softball, I don't know, volleyball, whatever.
I think track was cheap.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
that was probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with a lot of money.
Mhm.
And so track was one of those sports where it didn't cost a lot. You just needed a pair of shoes, and so that made it easier, I think, on my family. And so that's kind of where I started. And then once
Mhm.
I got into high school, another sport I picked up was volleyball. Was
Yeah.
good at volleyball, but track was just one of those sports where it was easy. And so yeah, so that's kind of the road that I went down, and I really enjoyed beating people. I just at my core, I'm pretty competitive. And so I love when people tell me I can't do something. And so I learned that as at a very young age, at the age of 8. And so that's just the sport she chose to put me in, and that's where I excelled.
What state are we growing up in?
Washington State. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I
Yeah,
I
yeah,
probably
born
could
and
have thought
raised.
that out. Yep.
Mm.
And when you got into track, did they immediately put you in sprints or did you try other things?
Immediately into sprints. I
Mhm.
immediately started running. I probably have to look and see if I even still have quite a few records, but over the summer, those were just the events that I did was, the 100, the
Mhm.
200. Those were kind of my main events, actually. I didn't start long jumping or high jumping until I might have did high jump a little bit younger, but long jump didn't come till like my sophomore year in high school,
Hmm.
is when I started long jumping. And so, but yeah, it was always the sprints. My endurance system was not the best. I think you'll probably hear that from a lot of short sprinters. I was very much a short sprinter. Anything over 200 meters, I did not enjoy. So I was just naturally fast. So everything kind of went more to the short sprints.
I love that, first of all, that you can be open and authentic with us and say, hey, anything over 200, because, I live my life on social media, right? So Twitter
Yeah,
and all that kind of stuff. And I love when coaches are like, oh, if you're going to be a sprinter, you got to be, if you're a 100-meter person, you're also a 400-meter person, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, guys, if we go back, I bet you also were
we're
someone
not
who only,
doing it. Exactly. And my high school coach to this day, her and I are still great friends. Her name's Cheryl Schabel. In
nice.
high school, she wanted me to run the 4. I did it one time my freshman year. I ran 63 seconds and I literally sprinted the first 2 and then died. And I had never, ever, ever, ever had a feeling like that before. And I remember crossing the line and I looked at her and I was like, don't ever.
Never.
And I was one of the best ones on the team. I can say this now, and this is why even I carry this into my later coaching life is, in high school when parents or kids ask me, should I run the 4? I'm like, yes. But I was a prima donna. I got away with a lot because I was good. And so running 300s at practice or having to run anything over 200, I kind of got away with doing that. I wish I hadn't, but I did. And so, but yeah, so I wasn't the best at anything over 200.
Sounds like you had a pretty good relationship with Coach. Did you say Sybil or Seibel?
Schabel. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Shabel?
Cheryl Schabel. She's
Shabel,
a
got
high
it.
school coach at Kamiak and where I went to high school for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of memories do you when you think about Coach Scheibel? It's funny your face lit up when you first mentioned her name.
Yeah.
Probably some pretty good times between with you and her.
Great times. We won a state title with her, and just she very much molded me in a way that allowed me to not only be a leader on the team. Yes, I kind of got away with a lot, but there was still very, very exciting moments of just being successful and her knowing I was a good athlete and even kind of going back later, years later, learning like, you were kind of one of a kind. Like there wasn't another, they used to call me, please, I'm not giving anybody permission to call me this to this day. I'm just going to say it. But they always called me Fran Green. And so there's not another Fran that ever came through here. And so, hearing that was pretty special whenever I talked to her. But yeah, she's very sweet.
Did you have any inclination in high school, and most of our coaches didn't actually, that you wanted to be a track and field coach?
I did not. No, I didn't. So how the story went with me getting into coaching.
Well, don't go there just yet. No,
Okay.
no, we're good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
I,
a like
no, I
like
had
all good coaches, you're already trying to get 5 steps ahead of me. I get it. I get it.
good.
Uh,
Yeah.
okay, so perfect. I appreciate that. What do you remember how you interacted with Coach Scheibel in regards to the workouts? And what I mean by that is, uh, like when you asked questions, first of all, did you even ask questions? Some kids, by the way, we're dealing with, 14, 18-year-old kids here in high school, right? Are literally just run this. Okay, I'll run that. I don't really want to run the 300, and some are inquisitive and curious about, hey, so why did we do this on Monday, but we did this on Tuesday? Do you remember kind of your interactions with Coach Scheibel, looking back now, knowing that you became a track coach?
No, with her, no. College, yes, but with her, no. I just kind of did what she asked me to do, and we had such a good relationship. I kind of knew the game plan going into every meet. Back then, we scored a lot. A lot of the meets were scoring meets, and
Right.
so every weekend you're competing for something for points. And so I was able almost every weekend to do what I was good at and what helped the team win. And so. I don't recall quizzing her. Maybe she may recall that a little bit more, but
Mhm.
I don't I don't recall asking questions or trying to figure out why. Like I said, I was just pretty talented. I was one of the best on the team, and so it made it pretty easy for me to just follow suit and do what I did best, and that was just going out and trying to beat people every weekend or every meet. And so
Did
I don't
you
recall asking questions.
how much did you pay attention to the other kids at other schools in regards to like I'm ranked number one in the state, or oh, I'm number four, I gotta work on beating these three girls, anything like that, or did you just focus on
There,
your
there
inside?
were there were two or three girls that were pretty good. I remember their names pretty well. Seville Broussard and Celeste Stutheit was one, and those two young ladies, like, we battled a lot. And they were pretty, we were on the same side of the state, and then obviously I would see them more once we got to the state meet. But those two, it was head to head. They were a little bit older than me too, so.
Mhm.
I loved trying to get the opportunity to beat them whenever I got a chance to compete against them. But yeah, I mean, that those were probably two of my biggest competitors. But I was confident, pretty confident athlete. So I always knew, like, if we're gonna line up, we're gonna line up. And maybe that's the 8-year-old in me hustling for money. I don't know, but but lining up, I was let's go. So, I think I won more times than not. But it definitely was a battle between the three of us all the time.
When we're talking to an or about and a male athlete, sprinter specifically, typically we say, football is very complementary to track and field because of the timing of the seasons, yada yada. For women sprinters, I think a lot of that in the same context with volleyball. Volleyball typically being in the fall. How did that, balancing both? Because volleyball is another sport that can be very maybe time consuming is the right word here, meaning clubs and practices and wanting to air quotes here own the athlete. How did you balance those two very competitive sports?
See, volleyball was very much secondary for me. Although I absolutely loved playing volleyball, like, loved it. And if I had known any better, I might have tried to play it in college if
Hmm.
I could have. But it really was just a sport to keep me busy during the fall, to be honest with you, with all the jumping and all those components. I
Yeah.
think those were things that really helped me when I did start long jumping. I high jumped 180 in high school. And so that also helped with my high jump. And so, those were components that I was able to translate over. But the volleyball coaches really wanted me to do club volleyball as
Right.
well, but it was expensive and I didn't have money. And then on top of that, it was during the spring. And so I
Oh,
was like,
right.
I
Hmm.
am not going to give up what I'm doing on the track to play volleyball. So I just played volleyball during the actual season, and then when it came this spring, I was on the track.
Yeah. Yeah. It's volleyball is one of maybe my top three sports, college football, track, and I do
Love it.
love volleyball a lot. But it has a lot of similarities when I look at the year-round track aspect,
Yes.
especially for our younger track athletes when we talk about summer clubs and things like that. And I'm like, man, volleyball is just as bad. It's a 365. You got to be you have to be in club to get recruited and all this stuff. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Have to be in club to not only be noticed, but also when you get back into the high school season, they look at that too and determine, are you a starter? Are you
Mhm.
not a starter? What positions are you playing?
Right.
How much skill do you have? And now that's very skill is so big now,
Mhm.
even when you go into college. But yeah, it definitely is a intense sport.
What
You're
what
right.
year what year did you graduate high school?
95.
Okay, so you were still in the pre-libero
Yep,
volleyball. Yeah.
pre-libero. I don't libero. It took me a minute to understand that, but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mainly played front row, but middle and outside hitter.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
Uh,
libero position is all new for me.
Yeah, I figured you were probably middle or outside. Yeah, it's interesting to me. So when I was at Troy University, my girlfriend was a volleyball player, and that's when they transitioned. And it's interesting to look at it today because that was a pretty big change to volleyball, right? No more where you had to have served to make the point, things like that. Pretty radical change. And I think about that with track and field as we think about our sport, and sometimes we need to change, and we're a little bit harder sometimes to change. But I look at volleyball, it's like, man, they did it and ran with it. I think it's a little bit more of an exciting sport the way they're scoring now in this libero thing. And you're right, libero was a very like, what is this? Wait, someone's going to only play back row and gets to change in and out whenever they want. And like, wait
Yeah,
a minute, that's not traditional volleyball. And
right.
it's definitely been owned and succeeded. So it just interests me kind of where you were in that period. But that was because you were traditional volleyball, and now
Traditional
we have
volleyball.
contemporary volleyball.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I agree.
love
Yeah,
that.
a little bit different.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, senior year, you're doing great things. You're long jumping, etc. You're looking at going to college. So a couple questions all packed into one question. So
Okay,
where'd you look at and where'd you go? And at
sure.
that point, as an 18-ish year old kid, what were you thinking you were going to become? A teacher, a business owner, an accountant? I don't know. What were you thinking as you were looking at colleges?
So I didn't really realize the opportunity to go to college until probably my junior year
Hmm,
in high school. I didn't know that it was a thing. I didn't know that you could get a scholarship. I didn't know that it was something that was possible. And I don't remember how I found out. It could have been that started getting letters in the mail. I think I did because I had a pretty big box of letters from everywhere. But I didn't, it didn't dawn on me until I was more of a going in to my junior year.
yeah,
And once I realized that, I was like, okay, I not only got a lot more serious academically and then about track, knowing this could take me someplace that nobody in my family has ever been. And my dad, and that might be a whole nother story, but my dad was only had a sixth grade education, and so he just worked
yeah.
his life, and similar to my mom. And so, that wasn't something that I grew up around knowing that.
Mhm.
And so once I realized I could go to college for track, um, and looking at all the letters and really trying to figure out where, all the calls coming in, and, back then it's old school calls. So everything's on the regular phone, there's no cell phone, there's no, so I'm running, you wait till you get home and check your answering machine. I know I am dating myself. It's horrible, but it's true. Like,
So kids, an answering machine
an
used to be
answering
this box
machine
that acted as your voicemail, essentially.
did. And it did. And I didn't have my own like phone line. I had
Right.
my own
Sure.
phone in the house. Like,
Yeah. Who
anyway.
who who did? Wait a minute. Come on. We grew
I
up a little bit
know.
similar. It's like
Yeah.
who did? What are you talking about your own phone line? That's crazy
Phone
talk.
line. I bought it myself when I got my first job. But anyway, um, yeah, so once I kind of started getting all these phone calls and letters and stuff like that, it became pretty overwhelming, to be
Mhm.
honest with you,
Sure.
because I just didn't know a lot. And so um I mean, a lot of different schools, Oregon, I got letters from everywhere, pretty much all around Washington State.
Mhm.
The places I ended up going to visit, one was Washington State. I went to Indiana. BYU was recruiting me pretty heavy. I didn't end up going on a visit there, but Washington, and Washington State were pretty big. UCLA, Arizona. There's a good handful in there. And then even when I looked back at some of the letters, realizing there was a lot of coaches that called, and I didn't respond in the way that I probably could have.
Yeah.
But what it ended up coming down to for me was who I felt comfortable with from a coaching aspect. And Coach Lisa Olson was at Washington State. And so every time I talked to her, I smiled. We rarely talked about track. And I just felt this connection with her. And years later, when I decided to go there, she told me, she was like, I about fell on the floor when you told me you were coming here. And she said, because I didn't think I had a chance at all to get you. And so, but a lot of it just boiled down to her personality, and her and I
Mhm.
are best friends to this day. Um, but that's, that those were kind of the places I had went. I went to Indiana, was my first time
Yeah.
really like away from home, like that by myself. And I actually loved it there.
Hmm.
Just I was like, wow, this is cool. Culturally, it was very
Mhm.
different for me growing up. And so but ultimately I decided on Washington State, and a lot of it had to do with Lisa Olson.
Well, first of all, Lisa Olson is awesome.
Yeah,
Love her. Got to know her when she was at Purdue, and one
yep,
of her high jumpers there was a good friend of mine. So we palled around a lot. Just a great human being. When you
yep,
said her name, I was like, oh, well, of course.
yep,
Okay,
exactly.
perfect. Love her. And of course, she thought she had no shot at you. That's just her humility and
Oh,
humbleness that she has. Yeah, yeah. She's
exactly.
surprised when anybody signs with her because I don't know why, because she's awesome, by the way.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
She's back volunteer coaching at Cal, which makes me super
Yep,
happy.
that's right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, she was the probably the number one reason why I went there.
Yeah. And big volleyball family now. Her daughter plays and
All
everything. Yeah, yeah.
family.
That's
I
right. That's
know
right.
her little Gracie.
That's cool.
That's her. I mean, I've known her before she was born.
That's
So,
so
but
cool.
yeah, pretty
Love that.
cool.
So you pick Washington State. Love that. Now when you grew up, are you growing up? You mentioned it, but I don't know Washington well enough. Are you growing up on the west part of the state?
I'm on the eastern side of the state in a place called Tri-Cities.
Okay, so Washington State was pretty close to
Pretty close
home
to
then.
me,
Okay, yep,
two
yep,
hours away.
yeah.
Mhm.
Because if I do know this about Washington, because I've done this trip, east to West Washington, that's a haul. That's
Oh, it's about 4 or 5 hours, and then you got
yeah,
mountains in the middle, and
yep,
the climate changes
yep.
drastically from east to west. It's very, very, very different.
I had to fly
Yeah.
into Spokane when I was working on the Spokane facility, and I couldn't get a ticket for like less than 1,200 $1,500. It was crazy, but I
It's
could get a
not.
ticket into Seattle for like 400,
Yep.
and I was like,
I
oh
know.
man, it's like this sucks. But I did. I flew into Seattle and drove,
You
and it was
did?
yeah.
Well, I guess it's a big price difference.
Yeah, yeah, it was too much. I mean, if it had been a couple hundred, it's like, okay, for convenience, but no, it was a grand. And
Yeah.
so, but I had to get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got to see all of Washington. So I know
Yeah.
East and West. I was like, that's two different states, man. It is a wholly
Big
different
difference.
place. Yeah, love it, love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you go to Washington State.
Yes.
Now I know Lisa was a big influence there, but you mentioned you went to like Indiana for a visit, which beautiful campus, right? Was some of the play a little bit that it was closer to home?
No, actually,
Okay.
it wasn't about being close to home. I think it was the stressful, overwhelming feeling that I had going through the process,
Hmm.
which I think does impact how I recruit today,
Hmm. Sure.
but very much it was just a lot.
Hmm.
And I didn't know how to process it other than going with, but I really like her.
Hmm.
Um, and and that was a lot of it. When I turned 18, I told my mom, listen, when I leave here, I am out. I'm not coming back. We sold everything. Y'all can get rid of my bed. Not that I have anything against being with my parents, but I am an adult now. It's time to grow
Yeah.
up. And
Okay.
so I had no intentions of going back home. So it wasn't really about being home.
Hmm.
That was the decision. It really just fell down to I'm like, who do I want to be able to coach me every day?
Hmm.
And that's really what it kind of came down to for
Yeah.
me, was really more just her person.
And something you mentioned there is it's interesting to me. I work really hard at giving grace to everybody and everything. I literally, Francesca, when someone cuts me off in the car, when I'm driving,
Mhm.
instead of getting mad, I literally think like, oh, maybe that person just got a terrible phone call. Their spouse is leaving them,
Happening.
their job, whatever, something like they didn't do it on purpose. They don't know who I am, so they didn't do it on purpose. Something has
Correct.
to be going on. So something you said there is interesting. We're going to skip ahead here a little bit. I'm just curious. You mentioned, as you were dealing with recruiting calls, and you said, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit. I probably didn't answer them how maybe in hindsight I should have, and so I'm kind of imagining like you didn't, you blew off some coaches, or you don't seem like a rude person, even as an 18-year-old. I don't think you were rude, maybe necessarily anybody, but maybe it kind of sounds like I just, they weren't. I'm getting calls from UCLA and Washington State, Washington Junior College. I'm not even going to reply back. And I think in your head you were like, probably would have at least said, "Hey, coach, thanks for recruiting me, but I'm not interested." Right. So knowing that was your experience today, we still have a lot of, they're still 18-year-old kids. I know these 18-year-old kids have cell phones today and internet, and we didn't have that when we were 18. But they're still 18-year-old kids. Their brains are still developing, etc. Do you have some grace when a kid maybe doesn't respond to you the way you would like them to respond, meaning whether they blow you off or whether they laugh in your face, whatever. Again, these are kids. Even here's the thing, even the whatever you think is the biggest, greatest air quotes here university in the world, they still get kids that scoff at them, for crying out loud, guys. Sorry, no one has the perfect Pollyannish thing here.
Yeah,
So do you have some grace for 18-year-old kids, or do you think
absolutely. You
because in
have.
today's world they should know better today?
Well, to be truthful, like what I thought was stressful, I mean, they have so much more now at their fingertips. So it's even more stressful, right?
Mm,
And then now with all the changes that are happening within NCAA, athletics, there's even more stress on top of that. And so the pressure to make the right choice, but also knowing, yeah, there's the transport, there's so many other things at their
mhm,
fingertips, like I think back then for me, the difference of not responding or not being sure, I had one coach, and I won't say where or whatnot, but they literally called me
mm,
every single day, and I didn't know how to respond to that. I didn't know, do I say I'm not interested? Am I not interested?
right.
Like what? But this is, a bigger school, so why wouldn't I consider that? So like
Right.
that I was going kind of through all of that, and then more and more kept coming from letters to phone calls to, so it's just like, how do I respond to all of this?
Yeah.
And so that part is where it became pretty overwhelming, I think. But now that it's even more.
Yeah.
So, I just find I do give that grace. And I think, having the ability with text messaging is huge.
Hmm.
Um, I'm still old school. I still like the phone call. I think that that's a big part of it, but I think giving them a little bit of grace of saying, I try to get on the front end of it,
Mm,
those first calls with them. Listen, tell me about your process. Are you overwhelmed? Are you excited? Are you, tell me, I try to get that information from them to feel how they feel initially,
hmm.
like, no, this is a lot, or man, this has been a lot, or no, I'm super excited, coach. You can get that feel pretty early on. And then now I know, how do I approach this young person? And is it reciprocal? Are they reaching out to me the same way I'm reaching out to them? So, and then if they don't reach back the same, I let them know, like, I get it. You're going to get a lot. So I'm not going to call you every day or
Hmm.
every, other day, but I want to develop a relationship with you, and it's two ways, and so that's how I try to approach it.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. I get a little kind of cringy is the right word, but when sometimes our coaches are, wagging their fingers at kids saying, "Oh, you should know better," and blah blah, and it's like, man, they're still 18. And you brought up
Right.
a great point there, Francesca, about sometimes we'll wag our fingers because it's like, well, you have every piece of information in your finger. Why would at your cell phone? You should be better informed. But I love how you put that. It's like, man, it can. You think you were overwhelmed in the
Yeah,
90s going through this process? Today,
they got so
more coaches know how to reach you from
yeah,
all levels, and they are. And I love, I think about like the other side of the coin a lot too. So when you talked about a coach calling you every day, it's interesting because I know someone heard that and was like, "Oh, that's cringy." I guarantee that coach thought, "Oh, I'm showing her how committed I am to her." Like I
absolutely.
really like that person was saying like they thought they were doing in their
Yeah,
way, showing like, "Oh, I'm committed to you. Like, look, I'm a bone on the dog. I'm gonna fight for you now because
I'm
I'll
coming
fight for
for
you,
you.
an athlete."
And we
Yeah, yeah,
talked
yeah.
about it years later, right? Like, because
Good.
I still knew them in still,
Right.
and so I just, it was one of those things where it was like, it had nothing to do with thinking it
Right.
was bad. I just didn't know how to respond to
Right.
that,
Right.
you
And,
know?
and
So,
that's key right there. When someone is telling you no, whether they are physically saying, "Hey, coach, thanks, but no thanks," or they're ghosting you, it ain't about you. They
right.
don't know you. That's not a personal thing. It's a million different. They're 18-year-old kids. They don't even know what shoes they want to wear tomorrow. How in the world are they supposed to pick a college
Yeah,
for
with
tomorrow?
all different choices out there and knowing what's best for them.
Yeah.
And so I myself and even my staff here, I tell them all the time, we're gonna hear no a lot, and that's okay. And you got to give them permission to tell you no,
Yes.
in a sense, because it's better to know early, and then you
100%.
can go on to the next recruit. But also understanding that you open the door for it, and it's gonna happen. But when there's somebody that we really know is a good fit for us, and we know that really fit what we're doing, and we're going to push hard at them, and
Mhm.
we should do that. But yeah, they're 18-year-old kids, and we're helping guide them as well, and their parents. I've had some
Yeah.
recruits, a lot of parents that'll say, "Man, this is our first. We don't know how this process works." And again, I go back to 17, 18-year-old Francesca, and we didn't know either. I didn't know,
Right.
and so I try to help educate them as well, which is
Yeah,
very helpful.
that's a good point too about the parents, because again, you think, oh, well, they're adults and blah blah blah, and it's like, well, unless they were recruited, and by the way, they would have been recruited differently than they today because of everything has changed. Even if they're college educated versus non-college educated, just because they went to college doesn't mean they were recruited. They still don't know what the athletic recruitment process looks like. So you're right, you're kind of teaching from the jump, and I was thinking about this process too. Again, no matter how good or not good. I hate that term, but wherever they are in their athletic realm, they're getting hit up from a lot of coaches. All the coaches are at, let's be real here. You're all asking the same questions in different variations. Just like you said, I agree 100% and believe it that, I'm trying to get to know the person. I already know your stats. We can almost throw that away, but I need to know who you are and will that fit with my team? Well, everybody else is trying to figure that out too.
Exactly. Exactly. And how authentic is it? And
Hmm.
it's an interview process both ways, right?
Right.
That's what recruiting process is. It's similar to dating. It's similar to any relationship.
Yep.
You're trying to relationship build,
Yep.
and you need to know, does this young person come into my program and help us get better? And am I the person that can help them get better?
Right.
And so that's, both sides of it. It's you're really trying to understand, and character is a big part of that.
Mhm.
Um, and, especially nowadays with when so much is at stake is, there's some coaches who like, I don't care what you do off the track. I know what I need you to do on the track.
Right.
And there's a lot of truth to that. But also at the end of the day, you want good people in your program,
Yeah.
and so that's it. You might got to do a little more digging. We might got to do, a few more visits. Might have to talk to a few more people, but you're right when it comes down to that 18-year-old person and you really learning and understanding. And they're all different personalities. Some are really shy, some will
Yeah.
and not say a word, and you're thinking to yourself, does this young person talk, or what is happening? And sometimes you're recruiting the parents too. I mean,
Mm.
that's a big part of it. So you're learning a lot about these young people
Yeah.
at a young age. And so yeah, I try to take all of that into thinking of 18-year-old Francesca back in the day.
Yeah, which is different, right? I mean, it's amazing. I love that you used kind of like the dating analogy.
Yeah,
I was at a clinic where you had a bunch of high school coaches and stuff, and they were talking about recruiting and I was like, I don't think that with the transfer portal and not salary caps, which might also be there, but roster caps, things like that. I was like, I don't think that's necessarily eliminating opportunities for high school kids. In fact, I do not believe that's eliminating
no,
opportunities for high school kids.
I don't
I
think
said,
so.
what I think it might do though, it's like you might grow up, we'll just use Washington as an example. You might grow up a huge Washington State fan, and you might not be able to go to that school. That's true. That might not be it. Here's the good news. There's a bunch of other great schools in the
There is.
state of Washington. And I use the analogy of dating actually. I was like, if a coach just doesn't return, because by the way, the flip side is correct too. Coaches ghosting recruits and things like that. This one coach said they get 300 emails a day. Now, I don't think that's true because that's a lot of emails. But even if they're exaggerating by half, let's say 100, 150, that's a lot. So I understand. I would implore all of our college coaches to answer every email, but I
Yes.
also get it. I get it. But I told these coaches, I was like, hey, if a coach isn't responding to you, they're telling you I wish they would actually tell you, but they're telling you thanks, but no thanks. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's a little bit like dating.
Yeah.
If I personally ask a lady out and she says no, well, if I keep hounding that lady, well, then it goes into harassment.
Yeah.
Now, here's the good news. There's a lot of other ladies out there
Yeah. That are
that,
willing
that,
to, yeah.
right? Same with college. I go, you are not going to convince if you are trying to get to XYZ university and they aren't answering your emails and blah 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 whatever, you're not going to change. Or if they've already said no thanks but no thanks, you're not going to change their mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not unless you do something big performance wise, but that because that's probably where it's at, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But guess what? There's a lot of other great coaches out there that would absolutely want you on their team. Go
Agreed.
find them. Go find them.
Agreed. And it is hard. And yes, 300 is a lot. The number is big. It is hard to answer everyone every day.
Yeah, I know.
A lot of times you try to scan through and say, okay, where are my holes or what do I need? And then
Yeah.
you go from there. I wish that I could answer
I
every email
know.
every day. I try. And or I'll send it to my assistants and say, hey, can you follow back up here?
Yeah.
And or let them know we're not interested, or at this point in time we're not recruiting that area, or
Right.
whatever the
Right.
case may be, but give some sort of answer. I know it's getting harder out there for young people to find a place to go, and but at the end of the day, and this is what I will tell parents or recruits, it's the business hat goes on at some point, and you do have to look at it from a business
Absolutely.
perspective. It's as much as you don't want to. Yes, you're recruiting the character of these young people, but as well as you got to look at, okay, I get where I'm at conference wise, but when I go to the national championships, we're all on the same level.
Right. Right.
So are you someone who can compete at the national
Yeah.
championships?
See,
Work your way down from there.
that's the example I use where someone will say, "Oh, well, I looked at your roster and I'd be your number two." And it's like, it doesn't, if they've already told you no, that they have a reason of why.
Yeah,
And so it doesn't matter that there's four other people that are slower or whatever than you. It does not matter. Those people don't affect you.
correct.
Just move on. Just move
Yeah,
on. Anyway,
yeah.
speaking of moving on, let's move
Yes.
back. Francesca, you pick Washington State, you pick the
I
great
did.
Lisa Olson.
Uh-huh.
What did you start out as a major? And maybe what
Sure.
did you end with that same major?
Yeah. So, I always thought, because I grew up with not a lot of money, my goal going to college, once I realized I could go and I was getting it paid for, that I was going to be this big businesswoman. I saw myself walking on Wall Street. I had a briefcase in my hand. I was
Oh,
in a
wow.
fancy suit, and I was making a lot of money. I
Yeah.
I have no idea where I was going. I have no idea what I was doing, but I knew those things to be true. I was making a lot of money, and I was in New York somewhere,
Love it.
and that was my goal. My dream was like, okay, I'm business. That's the route I'm going, because that's where the money's at. Um, that was my freshman year, and then I took my first business class, and it might have been accounting or econ or something like that. And I was like, what? I think it was accounting. I was like, I can't, this is not,
Like
no,
boring or like hard?
both.
Oh, both. Yeah.
One of those where I was like, okay, this is not, yeah, I just wasn't feeling it. And so I remember going to my advisor, like, okay, yeah, I'm not sure about this one. I knew the other route that I had considered was physical therapy. I knew I really liked, all things about the human body and all of that stuff. And it wasn't because I had a coaching thought. It was just more like, okay, well, if I can't do this, then maybe I would do that. But yeah, that route did change after my first semester. And then I went more kind of down the physical therapy route. And so started kind of pursuing physical therapy right after that. So I ended up majoring in kinesiology,
Oh, yeah.
to be able to do that. And so yeah, thought I was going to be a businesswoman.
Love it.
That definitely changed.
I love because again we're the same age, so our thoughts of what other things were because we didn't have the internet were what TV
Right,
was. So
exactly.
when you said walking down Wall Street, I'm like, oh yeah, that's where people made money. I had no clue where else they made money, but I knew Wall Street.
Wall Street,
You
that's
made
it.
money, yeah, 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 and you had to have a suit and you had to have a briefcase. Exactly,
Yep.
that's so funny. Just the
That's all
caricature
I
of
was
that.
telling. Yeah, that's all it was, is what I saw on TV, right? Like, there wasn't, because I did a whole bunch of research of
Right.
you can go to make money.
Love
I
it,
just
love it.
assumed it was over there, but yeah.
So tell us about your career at Washington State. Did you ever move into the heptathlon? Because you were talking about jumps and sprints, things like that. And did it at all during Washington State? Did it change to thinking about becoming a coach, or did that come after?
Yeah, no, it was actually at Washington State. So my first year there, I tried heptathlon initially, my freshman year, just because I high jumped, I had long jumped, I had to learn to run the hurdles. But everything else in the hep outside of the throwing events, I had done, and so we tried that. I remember an early meet. At that time, Dan O'Brien was training there, so I
Oh,
was
yeah.
training with him quite a bit. And even though Lisa Olson recruited me to Washington State, I trained up quite a bit with Rick Sloan, who was the head coach there.
Sure.
And so he was also training Dan during the '96 Olympic
Right.
Games. So
Right.
I trained a lot with them, and I think I did my first HEP in like the beginning of March or something like that. And everything was going amazing up until the jab in the 800. And then that's when I probably realized like I don't know about this one. The jab was a pretty difficult event for me, mainly just because I could never get it to stick right. I didn't really throw
You
any.
never did in high school at all, right? Because you actually have that in Washington, but you didn't even.
Never threw the jab,
Mhm.
never threw a softball. Almost were like, did you ever play baseball or anything like that? And so it was just
Right.
a word movement pattern for me.
Right.
So it was a really challenge to pick up. And then, as we talked about earlier, my endurance system was probably not very good at all. And so the 800 was also very much a challenge. So I think I might have tried it a little bit longer. And then eventually we just ended up switching back because I was really, really, really good at long jump and sprinting and high jump. And so it was like, okay, are we going to take away from those things in order
Right.
to be a heptathlete? And
Yeah.
so I really ended up focusing more later on the year back into some of my individuals, and it worked out good. I was Pac-12 champ or Pac-10 champ as a in the long jump. I think I was second in the 100, fourth or fifth in the high jump.
Dude.
I scored probably over 30-ish points, 25, 30 points at Pac-10s at my freshman year.
Holy
So
cow.
yeah, so I did pretty well.
Yeah. Are you, this is a totally dumb question, but it's my show, so I get to ask it. Are you like sad of the demise of the Pac-10 slash
I
12?
am.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that was hard. I just
It is odd.
it's odd, going from obviously I went from Pac-10 to Pac-12 and then
Mhm.
watching everything that's transpired and how much it's changed,
Yeah.
obviously everything that's now happened at Washington State as well is
Yeah.
hard. I get things change and evolve and it's unfortunate that some of the things have happened. However, I also do understand that times are changing and things are different and things
Yeah.
have to evolve and we just have to kind of roll with it. And I'm just happy that it provided the ability for me to be sitting here today and me to be able to go through everything that I did at Washington State
Yeah.
and beyond. So
I
I
imagine,
benefited from it, so it
right.
was good.
I imagine this has to be, back in the day, there was a big power conference called the Southwest Conference, and
Yeah,
it pretty much got dissolved to go to the SEC and Big 12. And I imagine that's how a lot of people, like, they went to Houston when it was a Southwest school, and it's like, man, now we're not. Like, what do you mean? Like, that's so weird. And it is weird today that there's no Pac-10, Pac-12.
yeah,
It's weird. I live in Big Ten country here in Champaign. It's weird that Oregon, like
yeah.
the first Big Ten conference championship with the new mega conference was cross country right here in Champaign. And so I went over and watched, and you see Penn State and Indiana, and you're like, yeah, okay, Northwestern, yeah, it makes sense. And then there goes Oregon. It's like, wait, what? And then
Yeah,
there goes UCLA. I'm like, wait, what?
yeah.
This is
I
just,
know it's different.
it's
Yeah, it's very weird.
wild,
Yeah,
wild,
very,
absolutely
very
wild.
different. But
It's
but
so,
understandable. I get it.
yeah,
Things have changed quite a bit,
yeah.
so
So when you're a conference champ of a conference like the Pac-10, uh, typically you have a shot or at least a thought of competing after college. So
yeah.
as you graduated, did you compete after college? What was the
I did.
post-college
Yeah,
thought?
I did. So I was just explaining a little bit of being a Pac-10 champ. Then I was fourth at nationals my freshman year in the long jump as well. Long jump ended up becoming more of my
Right,
primary.
right.
And so, through that and through just kind of the journey of me also getting into coaching, I started coaching right when I graduated as well.
Okay, so was that
So
the plan, or were you still thinking maybe PT or something like that?
So actually, and this is, I think, a part that I skipped over a little bit. When I finished my freshman year in college, Rick Sloan, we had a summer track camp every summer,
Right.
career track and field camp. And so I would stay in Pullman every summer and take summer classes.
Hmm.
And so while I was taking classes, I would work camp. And so my very first year was at the end of my freshman year. I was working the camp, and that was kind of my first experience into coaching,
Hmm.
and really like taking these young 12 to 18-year-old kids and watching them when they came in at the beginning of the week, and then just seeing how much they evolved in 1 week. It was fascinating to me,
Right.
to be able to, and to be able, like, man, they listened to me, and they were, taking instruction, and they got so much better in just that 1 week time. And so I really loved that. And I remember Sloan coming up to me at the end and saying, hey, great job. Like that was, something that you kind of are a natural at that. And I was like, okay. I still didn't have coaching as a thought. I was still kind of going down the PT route. And then my sophomore year, I ended up with an injury that took me out, and I had to have surgery. My sophomore year, I had tore a ligament on my big toe, and so I had to have that repaired. Yeah, and so I ended up redshirting that year and then working my way back. And so it was, and I still every summer worked camp. And I think it was my junior year that he finally kind of came up to me. And he's the one who really put the nugget in my ear about coaching. And so he just kept saying, like, have you ever thought about it? And I'm like, Coach, yeah, not really, not until you
Hmm.
said something to me, and every year I was our team captain. I was a leader on the team every year. And so, I kind of served in a leadership role, and I was at the time we called it SOB, Student Athlete Advisory Board. Now they call it SAC, which
Right.
is the Student Athlete Advisory Committee.
Right.
But I was president for 2 years of that. And so, I did a lot in that leadership position. And so it was probably going into my junior year that he finally just kind of said to me, he's like, listen, have you ever really thought of, like, let's talk about this a little bit more? So we talked more about it. And then going into my senior year, he revisited the conversation again and just said, I know you graduate at the end of the year, and I'd redshirted. So it's the end of my fifth year.
Right.
Um, I had got my undergrad degree in 3.5 years because I took summer school every
Summer.
summer.
Mhm.
So because of my redshirt year, I was also able to get my master's. So in my
Nice.
fifth year, I was finishing up my master's. And so
What'd you get your master's in?
so my master's was in education with an emphasis in athletic administration.
Oh yeah.
So I kind of was still going down that PT route. And then I also, having, since I had served on the
Hmm.
SAC or SOB committee, all of that, I also thought maybe I'd go into administration maybe for
Yeah.
athletics, or coaching, one of the two. And he had kind of put that nugget in my ear. So I looked more at that route of from a master standpoint. And so, yeah, going into my senior year, he basically was like, listen, I am very serious about this. I will have a position that will open at the end of this year in the sprints. And if you're interested, I'll teach you. I will kind of teach you the ways in a sense. And
Yeah.
so that's what we ended up doing. So right when I graduated, he hired me full time to coach the sprints. And I
Okay.
know,
All right.
crazy.
A lot to unpack here.
I know.
Let's take a step back.
Yep.
Where does this confidence of leadership come from you? So you mentioned being, leading the SOB, um, getting out and coaching is a leadership thing, right? Like there's self-confidence and there's lack of self-confidence. And even today and back then, nothing's changed with 18-year-old kids and in this world, in the sense of that a lot of them struggle with self-confidence.
Right.
Was this something that was modeled by a coach in high school, a teacher, your parents? Where you've got some like modeling, because we don't inherently have that. We have to see that sometimes. Where's that come from for
I
you?
mean, it takes a village. So I feel like I could probably take nuggets from everybody around me. I really do um, stem a lot of my confidence probably back to my dad. I would say he was very much a very quiet guy, didn't say a lot. but he was an extremely hard worker. He worked for the railroad for 36 years. He passed in 2005. But he went to work every day, drove 2 hours to and from work every day.
Holy.
Um, and he never complained. You just work, you just get in and you get it done. And so there was a lot of that. And then my mom as well, she was kind of more the disciplinarian as well. She worked for a little while and then ended up staying at home with me and my siblings. But
Mhm.
I think a lot came from that as well. And then just athletics in general. I mean, that's the beautiful part of athletics is it does breed a sense of confidence. And for me, my confidence, I think, just came in the fact that I knew I was a good athlete and I beat people.
Mhm.
It was kind of black and white. I'm a somewhat of a black and white person. And
Right, right, right.
I like literally was like, hey, well, if me and you are racing and I beat you, then I'm better than you.
Yeah.
So like I not comparing that to the
Mhm.
confidence I have now, I just think that's kind of a part of what stemmed in it as well.
Yeah.
So when I got to Washington State and I was a part of that program and really seeing the young ladies that we recruited into the program and how good we can be, I just always tried to help them rise up to a higher level, to compete at a high level, and be able to accomplish whatever, it when you ran fast, you got accolades, you did better. It just all
Yeah.
of that I think was very simplistic for me. And so I think a lot of it is that. And
Yeah.
then I just think being around a lot of really good people,
Mhm.
whether it's family or friends or coaches, like I said, Coach Olson was a big part of that when I got to Washington State. Coach Sloan, he's very black and white, like there's no sugarcoating with him.
That's my next
Um,
question. Don't worry.
and so you kind of get used to that, and it's not to say that it was peaches and roses and all the time, but for me, I just think that was just a big part of where it came from for me.
So, okay, next question. You're exactly right. So, I know Lisa. I've met and spoken with her many, many times. I know Rick pretty well. Rick was very good friends with my mentor, Fred Dixon.
Yeah,
And you mentioned Dan O'Brien. Dan O'Brien's been on the show before and,
yeah,
talked very highly of Rick. Rick is different than Lisa.
yeah.
And I wasn't coached by either of these people, so that's always a little bit different as well. How did you, you know, coaches are a lot of the byproduct of people that they've coached and people that they've seen coach. So even you may never have been coached by Bobby Knight as an example, but you may have seen a Bobby Knight and going, okay, so that's what a coach is supposed to do,
Sure.
good and bad, etc. And in my understanding of like a Rick versus a Lisa, you talk about black and white. Pretty two different people. Rick
Bad
pulls no, yeah, Rick pulls no punches. You're exactly right. And I love him for it. Uh, did you, as you were, you're coaching in the summer, and then you're going to, and the next question is the third part of this stage of the question is going to be you going right into coaching as after your, I'm gonna say after your undergrad, but you got your grad work there done. Did you think more in the beginning of your coaching, oh, I need to be more like Coach Sloan or Coach Olson or an amalgamation of going back to high school coach? How did you think about what I'm supposed to be as a coach or how I'm supposed to act as a coach?
Yeah. I have a mix of both of them, I think. One of the things, so Coach Olson ended up moving to Purdue my junior year.
Okay.
So my junior year, senior year, I was primarily coached by Coach Sloan.
Hmm.
And then, but her and I stayed in great contact. And it was for a while there with both of them. It was kind of that good cop, bad cop. However, kind of, I, me and Sloan worked really well in that regard because of his honesty. He was very straightforward. You knew what he was thinking and you knew how he felt. Now,
Right.
whether you agreed or didn't agree, you knew you knew where he stood.
Yeah.
But for me, he could shoot it straight, and it's like, all right, I got you, coach.
Yeah.
I didn't question. I never questioned the plan from either of them. I did what he asked me to do, and his training was in his head. So, it's not written down. It's
Mhm.
not, don't get a sheet to say, here's your warm up. If I tell you to be ready at 2, you better be ready at 2. And he's going to walk you through what your plan is for the day. And you're not going to know what you're doing until the day's over.
Hmm.
Um, or what you did until the day's over. But I trusted that.
Hmm.
And so, you had kind of posed this question earlier of how did I start to look at different styles of training. And so one of the things that I did do with him, I journaled a lot through college.
Hmm.
I did write down a lot of my workouts of what I did, and mainly more of my journaling was I'm pretty goal oriented as well. And so in my journal, I would write, this is my goal for the season. This was my goal for the day. This is what I want to accomplish. So I wrote down a lot of my workouts and I started to see the trends and patterns in which he put in a day. So I knew like, okay, it's a speed day today. So I'm probably going to run some 150s maybe. So I kind of have an idea, but he was just very straightforward.
Hmm.
So not only straightforward in his coaching, in his day-to-day style, he was in the office at 8 and he would leave at 12 to go work out, and he was very routine.
Right.
Everything was the same routine every day. I knew by 12 o'clock he was going to be in the weight room working out. So like it was his routine. So you just kind of get used to that
Right.
type of pattern. And so his style being very straightforward and honest. I think my first couple years coaching, one of the things he told me, he said, it's a lot, especially as a young coach, it's a lot easier to be tougher and keep those reins tight. Because if you let them go, you can't just go back and pull them back. It's a lot harder to do that.
Right.
So early on, you do have to set hard boundaries. And so we talked a lot about that as when I was first initially starting. And then I just, over time, evolved in different ways in which I coached over, it's been a minute, but now, and as I sit here, I feel like I have a mix of both, because then now you have to bring in Fred Harvey,
Right.
who him and Rick Sloan are very, very different. And
Yeah.
and so there's this balance of, personalities there that you had the opportunity to learn from.
Yeah,
So
I think spot on. I appreciate that. I think thinking of a Rick, and that makes me think of like a Brooks Johnson. You bring up Fred. I
Dave
think
Murray was that
about
way too.
yeah, right. And I think about Judd Logan, just any coach. Your style, who you are as a coach, I think that is one of the more important things for recruits to learn about you. And by the way, that means you allowing them to learn that, because
Sure.
sometimes a lot of the recruiting process reminds me a lot of, here in the private sector interviewing process. And you'd brought that up earlier about interviews. In a lot of interviews, like every interview that I'm involved in, I start off kind of the same way. I go, look, man, I need to know who you are, not who you think I want you to be. And by the
Yeah.
way, I'm going to be me, which means there's
Sure.
might be some things you don't like, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
I was like, because if we're real with each other, even if I don't think you're right for the job, thank God you will not have made yourself miserable here, which you will not have made me miserable, etc. And I think sometimes, not think, I know sometimes coaches and the kids, by the way, and the parents, by the way,
Yeah.
when they're in their recruiting stage, whether they're on their visit or on phone calls and Zooms, all that kind of stuff, they're trying to figure out, what does Coach Green want me to say to that answer? How would
Yeah.
she? And it's like, I just want you to be who you are. And if it's an answer I don't like, cool. That means you won't be miserable here. So I
Right.
think of, mhm.
And I think the part of that I've learned, probably in the last, I don't know, 6, 7 years, is you got to give them permission to be
Yes,
able to do that.
right.
And I think if you open the door to give them permission to do that, it makes it a whole lot easier.
Hmm.
And I say that early on. I want to know who you are.
Right,
Track is what you do, it's not who you are.
right.
And I need to learn, the sooner I can learn who you are, the better you are on the track.
Amen.
And not every coach,
That's right.
is way. And I get that, but I do want to learn who you are. I want you to know that I'm here to support you and help you on your journey. I've had mine. This is about me being that small resource for you to be able to accomplish what you want to. But if you give them permission, to be themselves sooner rather than later, then it makes it a lot
Yeah,
easier,
right.
I feel like. So
Yeah, I
I try
think so.
to do that early on, and them learn me. I try to explain to them pretty early, this is why I am who I am.
Mhm.
You're going to have to come in with blind faith and you're going to have to trust it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to do everything that I can to make you the best you can be. And there's going to be sometimes where, you just don't know what you need.
Right.
and I'm going to give you what you need. And that's, a part that you're going to have to trust in that process. So, I think just giving them permission to be that way
Yeah.
is a huge part of it.
I think that would be in that way from the get-go. And if the kid can trust and be themselves from the get-go, I think that reduces our transfer portal opportunities,
I-
honestly. Really do.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
the third thing to unpack on that great Washington State story is so after, so you got your undergrad in 3.5 years, then you go and you get your grad work, and right after you get your grad work, he hires you on as a full-time assistant. Okay,
okay.
so uh, I am of the belief that that should not be allowed. Here's what I mean by that, because typically an undergrad will graduate from university and then do a GA. You didn't do a GA, you went straight into full time, so even worse, in my opinion. Because here's what I say, and I'm gonna say this how I would talk to a dude, so forgive me.
You're good.
Here's what I don't understand. In May on Friday, you're hanging out with your homeboys playing Xbox. And I know girls play Xbox too, but this is just my story, okay, guys? Uh,
Yeah.
your boys, you're kicking it, you're doing what 21, 22-year-old kids do on the track. They're your teammates.
Yeah.
And then in September, when school starts back up, now you're
Yep.
Coach Green.
Yep.
Now,
And
I have a feeling you, for a couple of reasons. One, because of who you are, and two, because you've already a little bit explained how Rick counseled you on this. So you probably had a little bit better, uh, well, I'm going to use the word you use because it's the right word, boundaries with this.
yeah,
I'm not convinced a lot of us as 22-year-olds can make those right boundaries as 22-year-olds. What I say it shouldn't be allowed, meaning I think if you go GA, after your undergrad, I think you should have to go to another university. That university could be in the same town for all I care. I don't care. But being at the same university, we've had a lot of people on the show that have said, yeah, I probably didn't do things right
yeah,
real well right off the bat. Now they grow into it, but 22-year-olds ish, that's tough. How did you handle that
yeah,
transition from being teammate
yeah,
Francesca to, oh, that's Coach Green?
yeah. Um, I took his words very literal and very serious. And so what I had to have, I had to have some conversations with the athletes that were still on the team that just said, listen, I understand where we just were. But here's where we are now. And now my responsibility is to help you become the best athlete you can be. And I think knowing my grind, knowing my work ethic, knowing who I was as a person, helped that
Oh, sure.
a lot because they knew like, okay, well, it's different if I'm out hanging out with them, the night before,
Right.
in that regard. But I was very much not that type of athlete.
Okay.
The choices I made,
Yeah.
but so I knew they could look at me and say, okay, I've led by example since I've been here,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And so it made it easier. One athlete in particular that I just adore him, but his name was Anson Henry. He was on,
Oh, we know Anson, of course.
yeah, now he's doing what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so him and I actually probably he was the one athlete that I had to talk to really in depth because we were really, really good friends.
Sure.
And so I just said to him, please try as hard as you can to just see me in this coach role and trust that I'm going to do everything that I can to make you better. I'm going to learn as much as I can. I'm going to I'm going to do everything in my power to make you fast. And he did.
Wow.
And so by the time we got done with it, he ran 10:04 in 2050 and he never ran that fast again. I tell him that to this day. Because I coached him for a little while after that. And I'm like, and to
Love
this
that.
day,
Love
but
that.
he was my first All-American. He ran 6:66. He was third at the indoor NCAA championships. And it was all because we just had that conversation early. And so I really set those boundaries as
Yeah.
a coach. And I think that's so important to do so as early as you can, as hard as it is.
Yeah.
You
that,
have
that
to set those boundaries.
that's where I was like, I think you might have had a better shot at it because your maturity level at 22 is
Yeah,
maybe not the normal 22-year-old.
yeah.
The two
Agree.
things that stuck out to me about Anson Henry, first of all, you said he does what I do. He does it much better. Anson, if you guys are listening on the podcast, so in 2025, I'm pretty sure it's 2025, the years run in together sometimes. I did a special back in like February, March, where I interviewed a bunch of podcasters. So Anson was on there and talking about their show, and he has two shows because he's an overachiever.
I know.
But again, search his name and you'll find him. But go find his podcast. He has a couple of them.
Yep,
Unconventional Voices of Track and Field with his now wife, I believe. I hope
yep,
I'm not mistaken.
yep,
She's
yep.
beautiful. And
Well,
he has another one. He's gonna kill me. Anyway, go look him up. He does a great job. He's a fantastic insider of track and field. Great voice, first of all. That's why he does it better than I do. He has a better voice than I do. The second thing about that is 666 was third.
I know.
That barely makes does that make the finals today?
No, it
That's
doesn't.
crazy,
Not even close. And not even, you might not even make the meet.
right? That's when you said 66 third, I was like, not
Yeah,
today.
I know it. I
That's
know.
crazy, man.
Insane.
Oh my
Insane.
God.
So I hang that All-American certificate with pride. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Right up
that's
there.
one of the
It's one of those. Yeah,
love
it's
it.
a top one. But yeah,
Oh, that's funny.
it definitely is yeah, I
That's
know.
crazy.
Insane how much it's evolved.
It's all you
Uh,
guys' fault. You guys are coaching so much better today than you were back then. It's unbelievable. Okay,
Pretty much.
so you go straight into a full-time assistant. That's crazy. How did you handle, because you're still competing, so therefore
Yeah.
practicing. How did you handle that?
So that's where I probably went a little insane. So my first year coaching, I actually stopped competing. I tried to just fully dive into coaching. I really wanted to make sure that I was good at it and that I was really helping all my athletes succeed and coaching at a high level. But it was hard,
Wait,
every
wait, wait. So you had gotten up to fourth at USA's, and you decide your first year of your career, I'm going to put that on hold. Now, what we've learned, what I've learned at least, and this actually goes back to Coach Cameron Babb from Washburn University. We started coming up with this thought process that to be an athlete is selfish. And it's
yeah,
not a bad thing, but selfish meaning when coach tells you to do something, you're internalizing, okay, how does that make me a better long jumper?
yeah,
Coaching is more selfless in the sense of like now everything that you learn when Coach Sloan is telling you about long jump technique, blah, 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 you're internalizing that. Okay, now how do I speak that to my athletes so they can become better? That's a pretty big mark of selflessness. You put your athletic career, and you were good, by the way, on
yeah.
hold to like, okay, how do I dive fully into this?
Yeah, I think that was a part of it. I'd say that was half.
Wow.
The other half for me was, back then there was a ton of scoring meets. So like I felt like every other weekend we were scoring something.
Ah,
So because of that, every weekend I was doing 5 events, 4 events. Sloan, he's very competitive.
right.
So we're going to win the meet. You're not going to just compete. We're going
Okay.
to win the meet. And so within that, by the time that I had graduated, I was pretty tired. It had
Mm,
been a long career.
sure.
I always wanted, my dream ever since I started running track was to be in the Olympic Games. It was. I mean, since I was
Sure.
8, just see it, from FloJo to Jackie Joyner Kersey to all of them, I emulated those ladies, like I adored them. And so that was my goal. And then, just through some small injuries and just being a little tired. I did a lot every
Sure.
weekend. And so I kind of just was like, all right, let me just dive down the road of coaching and then we go from there.
Yeah.
But that first year was hard for me. I'm watching these long jump competitions and I just couldn't just sit there. The one thing though that I did enjoy that first year was, Sloan would be like, okay, at noon, he's going to do his workout. He's like, are you coming with me? And I could tell him, no, I am not working out with you today, coach. You are on your own. So
Yeah.
for the longest, I would say, nope, I'm not coming with you. But then it just sitting there, it was hard. So then I just kind of started secretly training on my own. Getting back into shape.
Mhm.
My athletes, we would lift in the morning at 6:30, and so I would go to the weight room at 5, and I would
Wow.
get my lift in, and then be there for my athletes, and then after their afternoon session, I would do my training session, And so then I just slowly started to work myself back into shape. So,
Why didn't you train with them, even lifting weights with them?
well, again, I'm setting those hard boundaries. I felt like that would kind of be crossing the line, for me to really focus on doing a good job as a coach and being, it's that balance between selfless and selfish, right?
Hmm.
So, like
Hmm.
you just had mentioned, I just felt like I really needed to focus on them when it was their time. And so I never trained with them. I always trained by myself, or I drag another friend along or something, but I never trained with them. And so as I slowly just kind of started getting myself back into shape, then I finally went to Sloan and said, "Hey, I'm not done yet." And he kind of just looked at me, and I just said, it won't impact my job.
Hmm.
I am, fully committed to being a great coach. And so he agreed. And so as long as it didn't impact, he was fine with it. And so yeah, so then this was in 2002. So I actually graduated in 2000. So I
Okay.
entered high school or entered college in 95, graduated in 2000. And then, so it was 2002. I was going to do in January, my first competition.
Wow.
Um, and so it was a home meet. And so I had asked him if I could jump in that meet because the long jump was before the running event started. So before my athletes even had to compete, I would have been done. So he was good with that. And this is where the story gets a little crazy, Mike. There's a lot of roller coasters, twists and turns, but my very first jump, I pushed back to go jump and ruptured my Achilles.
Oh no.
Yep. So I had did all that training, all that work. First,
Oh,
didn't even get to jump. And so was that 2002 or 2003? It might have been 2003. That was January
dude.
03.
And that's a biggie. That's not a
No,
hamstring, an ankle. That's your
no,
Achilles.
Achilles. Yep. So yeah. So then I'm thinking, obviously in the moment, like you're done. Like
Done.
that's it.
Right. Yeah.
There's nothing more. And so I go to the doctor a couple days later because they wanted the swelling to come down before I
Right.
had that first doctor's appointment. And the doctor's like, "Okay, I know why you're sad because you ruptured your Achilles." And I said, "Yeah, this is,
Yeah, duh.
ah, you know." And he goes, "But why else are you sad?" And I'm like, "Because my career's done. I had this dream to be in the Olympic Games, blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "Okay, so why is that dream gone?" And
Hmm.
I was like, "Because I ruptured my Achilles." And he's like, "So that happens all the time." And I had never really heard of an Achilles rupture, at
Right.
that. So you're just like, what? And he's like, yeah, I've done this surgery. And, and he goes through all his numbers and he's like, athletes come back from this all the time. If you want to keep jumping, you can.
Dude.
He kind of like, it was wild, like gave
Yeah.
me this permission to say, it's okay if you want to continue.
Right.
And so then my brain literally just shifted to, all right, let's go.
Well, we gotta get done. Yeah.
Got to get done. So I went back to getting the rehab and through that transition is about 7 months. It
Hmm.
took me a while. And again, it's you're done competing. Let's just focus on that. And so I come back to Coach Olson. I call her and I'm like, what do you think? She's at Purdue. She's the head coach at Purdue at the time. And she's like, well, you can do anything, Francesca. If you want to do it, you can do anything. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, what would you think if I moved out there with you? And I kept training. So I literally at the end of that season went from being selfless to being selfish.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought I have to see this through.
Right.
And so I moved to Indiana for a year and trained with her for a year, and I was a volunteer coach with her while I
Mhm.
was working my way back. So,
Wow.
yeah,
You know,
crazy journey.
what remarks to me about that is your doctor really gave an example of what a lot of coaches do on a daily basis, and
Yes,
that's believe in their athletes.
yes,
It almost it's funny how as you were describing the story, I'm like, oh, it sounds a little bit like Rick Sloan, in
yeah,
the sense of like, what are you crying for? Like,
Yeah. What are you
Like,
crying
are you deciding you don't want to do this? Because
for?
don't use the Achilles as an excuse, because I've done this 100 times. We can get
Right.
through this. I just thought that was really interesting and made me think about the coaches that believe in young people on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Again, talking about confidence and lack of self-confidence. And there's plenty of kids, and you've seen this, Francesca, plenty of kids who think they can't do something. And you're like, oh my God, dude, I've seen 100 kids like you. You absolutely could do this. You got to
Yeah.
believe in yourself. So that was a really interesting story
Yeah.
about the doctor. Like, all right, you're
Yeah.
sad. Cool. Are you giving up? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, what are we doing here?
What are we doing here?
Wow.
Because he's
Yeah.
like, because I can repair it in a way that makes it so that it's, if you're going to jump again.
That's
And I was
amazing.
like, well, yeah, it was like permission to know, like, it's okay,
Yeah.
and I get why you're sad, but, quote unquote, stuff happens,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like, you just roll with it. And,
Right.
it's taught me a lot. I think that it's
That's
taught me
cool.
a lot about just the ups and downs that you can go through, and
Yeah.
how you rebound from that. And that really, again, does impact. It's another thing to kind of add in my toolbox when I
Right.
am a young person now that has something major happen. It's, well, I've been there, so I get it.
That's
But
cool.
what are you going to do about it? You know?
So you go from Pullman, Washington to West Lafayette. And this is the first time you've been away from home.
It is,
How did
yeah.
that go for you? You did say you only went there a year.
I did only when I went there a year. I loved it for a lot of reasons. It was very different for me. The weather was probably the biggest
Sure.
change. Mainly because in the Midwest, just out of nowhere, it could be beautiful, and then a storm comes in like 20 minutes later, and you're like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
It was just really challenging in that regard. And in my Achilles, it was a challenge. It was an up and down roller coaster working my way back from that. And so I probably didn't really feel myself until the end of that 2004 season, because it just took so long. And but yeah, being there for a year, being there with her for a year. Another dear friend of mine was a high jumper there with Coach Olson, and you may know her name was Carrie Long.
So Carrie
And
was kind of like my first crush, man. I really liked
yeah,
Carrie a lot. Yeah. I loved Carrie, dude. If I'd
well,
have been in a different place in life and she would have been in a different place in life, and yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
I love Carrie a lot. The big
Yeah,
crush.
yeah. Me and her are still great friends to this day as well. And so we were training there. We competed for a club called the Indiana Invaders.
Yeah, I know the Invaders, absolutely.
Yep. And so, but it was a roller coaster ride, just kind of working through the Achilles piece. But I worked at a bank, part-time, and I was training and then volunteer coaching with her.
Mhm.
And the bank piece was pretty interesting. And it really is about who you know, because before I moved out there, a lot of the coaches on the football staff at Washington State actually had just come from there. And so
Huh.
they had knew a couple owners at a small bank there,
Mhm.
called Saline Bank. And so I worked there part-time, and learned a lot about money, that I didn't know about, learned a lot more. But yeah, just trained through that year. And like I said, the season was pretty rocky, and I really
Yeah.
didn't get it going until the end of the season. But it took all the way until my last competition, before I got the qualifying mark that I needed for the Olympic trials.
Okay, I was
So
going to ask, did you qualify for the trials though?
I
Dude,
did.
that's huge
So
because
it was
I
huge.
understand what Doc was saying about Achilles, and he's not wrong. And certainly in 20 years, we're better at today at Achilles than we were even in
Correct.
2004-ish time frame. But to come back, the reason you hadn't heard a lot about Achilles, with athletes and stuff, is because they go away back
Yeah.
then. 2000 and pre, like you had an Achilles rupture, you're
Yeah.
done. I
Yeah.
remember the first one I heard, like that came back with it was I don't remember the name of the person, but it was a steeplechaser that was an Olympian who ruptured their Achilles and came back to make the Olympic. And I was like, who does that? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So for you to actually come back and still make the trial, that's huge, bro.
Yeah.
Huge.
And it was the crazy part of the story, like I even still feel like it's kind of like a movie in a sense, was it took till the very last competition, and I had went to quite a few, and I just never felt myself
Sure.
until the end of the season. And so it was the last meet. Coach couldn't be there because she was with the team. And so it was at in Bloomington at IU,
Uh-huh.
and so I drove there, and it was beautiful out. I was like, okay, today is the day. I felt great. I had great sessions, practice sessions going into that. And I knew what I needed to jump because it was the last meet.
Oh, right.
I knew at that time, like if you don't jump a PR, you're not getting in. And so I knew I had to do something pretty,
Wow.
pretty big. And so as I get there, I'm getting ready to warm up. I was just talking about the storms. This storm blows in
Yeah.
and out of nowhere. And I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me. And so they delayed the meet for about 2 hours. And so then I, blow through the storm. I start warming up again, and I took my very first jump, and it was my best opening jump I had ever had. I think it was like 630 or something like that. And then I proceed to foul the next four jumps. So this is where it gets dramatic. So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, it's my last jump. And so I'm just standing there, and I'm a faithful person. And so I'm just like, God, I know you wanted me to do this. I know you wanted me to quit my job,
Yeah.
move to a place I've never been, go through everything that I've gone through for this moment right here. This has been my dream since I was 8. Just all I ask is you just give me the wings so I can fly.
Right.
So last jump, yeah, I ended up jumping a PR. So I was the
Dude,
last jump, last meet, last one to qualify for the trials.
no shot. Seriously.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Holy cow.
So it made it all worth it. Like
That's
it's it is,
amazing.
I'm like, that's why
What
I
did
never let people give up on themselves.
yeah.
I didn't give up on myself.
What did
So,
that feel like when they read out 6 point whatever it
oh,
was?
I bawled like a baby.
Oh.
I mean, it was like, because it was like this sense of relief of
Yeah.
everything, and when I left Washington State, I had some really good athletes, and a few of us are still pretty close to this day. We still talk quite a bit, and it was hard. Like that was my first experience leaving there and leaving them, and all of that. And so it wasn't easy. And so when that happened, it just made it all worth it. And so I think a
Oh.
rush of emotion really, got me. So I'm calling everybody, and everybody's super excited. And what even makes that story even better for me is I so that was in June of '04. The trials I think were in July. It was something like that.
Mhm.
And then oh, actually, I think they were in August because my dad came out for that, and it was in Sacramento, and that was his last trip he took, and he ended up passing that next in
Oh,
March of '05.
right. Oh.
So I have that picture of our memory outside of that hotel, right? And so, you don't know all of it's going to transpire in that manner, but that's why I never give up on anything
Yeah.
ever. I'm going to see it through as best I can. And I'm going to try to push my athletes to do the same.
I could see that fear of letting others down. It's not
Oh,
true, but
right.
I could see that like, oh, if that last jump doesn't go the way it does and you don't qualify, and it's like, man, I left the kids in Pullman for this. I'm this far away from my family because of this. I've let them down. It's not true at all. They're proud of you for
Yeah.
even attempting it, for crying out loud. But I could see that. And so when it actually comes through in fruition that you actually jump the PR and qualify, I could see just that flood of like, I
Yeah.
did it. We did it. This was all worth it in that sense for that goal. Yeah,
Yeah.
man,
It
that's
made it
amazing.
all worth it.
That's
Yep.
amazing.
Yeah. So
Okay,
cool.
so a few years in Pullman as a coach, a year in Purdue. Where do we go after that year and why?
So yeah, so then at the time, Lisa Olson, so her husband Greg Olson,
Yeah.
he coaches in the NFL,
Yep.
and right now is with the Raiders. But at the time they were in a transition trying to figure out where he was going to go. And For a moment there, Arizona was an opportunity for him. And Mike Stoops had just become the head coach at Arizona, and so they were in talks, and so the conversation kept going like, okay, well, if he goes to Arizona, like, what am I going to do? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I would love to get back to the West Coast and be close to my dad. Like I said, he was ill at the time. And so, my whole thought process went into getting there. Now at Arizona, and this is again where it's a pretty small world. At the time, Jim Livengood was the athletic director there. And Jim had been at Washington State, and he
Oh,
was there before I had got to Washington State, but he was there while Coach Olson was at Washington State. And so he's the AD there, and his senior associate AD is Chris Del Conte, who's now the athletic director at Texas.
oh yeah, Chris. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
The time he was the senior associate AD with Jim, but Chris also was at Washington State, who I had
Huh,
worked with at track camp over the summers at Washington State.
huh.
And so, we all kind of knew each other. And so the whole plan initially was that, okay, they moved to Arizona, then I'll just move to Arizona as well and figure it out, keep training, going from there. And so that didn't end up happening. Greg decided to take a job with the Detroit Lions. And so they moved to Detroit, and she had just had twin babies.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I don't know about living in Detroit. And so
A
then
lot of people say that. You're in good company.
yeah, I was like, I'm not sure about that one. So I'd reached out to Jim and Chris at Arizona, and I knew of Coach Harvey. I hadn't had a lot of interactions with him, but I knew obviously competing against him and stuff like that, that I knew who he was. And so I kind of started that process and just said, hey, if I still came to Arizona, could I still train and then maybe work in the department somehow?
Hmm,
And at that point, I wasn't sure if I'd get back into coaching because I knew it was tough. When I
right.
left Washington State, I knew getting a job at that level was going to be hard.
Mhm.
Um, and so when I reached out, it was really more like, okay, maybe I'll go down the administration route. And so I called Jim and I called Chris and Coach Harvey. And so they got me a job in marketing my first year. Chris lived literally right across the street from the school, and he had a little guest home in the back of his home. So I lived in the guest home my first year, and was training and working in marketing, and it was great. I could get home easy. And so it ended up being a good move for me.
Yeah.
So I moved out there in August of '04.
What a world you lived in the little
I
guest
know.
house of Crystal Conte.
No, isn't it crazy?
That's crazy, actually.
It's pretty crazy.
That
Even
is crazy.
we joke all the time, and again, knowing his kids when they were little, they're
Mhm.
beautiful young women now.
Yeah,
But yeah, it you never know how things are gonna go, but
yeah,
yeah, and so it worked. It worked
yeah.
well.
And I'm glad you got back to where, as this is a difficult time for you when your father passes,
Yeah,
much more accessible to get home when you need to be home, be there with your mom and your family and siblings and stuff. So that's good.
yeah.
Um, so you were so what year did you get to Tucson then?
So that was in '04. August of '04 was my first year.
And so you were in Tucson that whole time from '04 until 24.
So 24.
I guess 25. 25. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. I knew you were
so
there for a long time, but I don't know that I realized you were there for that long of a time. How did you so it's interesting because you talk about administration, and I
yep,
encourage a lot of our track coaches to get into administration, not because I want to lose them as track coaches, but I know a lot of important decisions about our sport are happening, and I'd like to have someone who understands track and likes track to be in those conversations. How
exactly.
did you, somewhere you had to make a decision of, okay, am I going to go administration route or am I going to go back into coaching? Shocker, spoiler alert, you got back into coaching. How did that come about?
So in '04, when I was working in marketing and I did train with Coach Harvey that first year. And then in '05, March of '05, like I said, my father had passed. Things changed quite a bit after that. And so for me, I decided it's time to hang up the spikes. So at the end of that season, I decided to retire. And then at that time, I had met with Jim Livengood a little bit, and then Coach Harvey, and we had just talked about kind of creating this new director of operations position.
All right.
And so I ended up actually being our operations person for 4 years. And so with that came the opportunity to do some work with the NCAA.
Hmm.
So I served on a couple of they had like a leadership institute for ethnic minority females, so I was a part of that. And then just so kind of learning and going to different conventions, stuff like that, more from the administrative side of
Mhm.
things. I at that time, I getting back into coaching, I didn't necessarily see
Mhm.
um, initially. But at the end of the day, it was kind of one of those things when I come back to that year that I was sitting there coaching my first year and I'm watching these athletes compete and I missed it.
Mhm.
Just I missed it. I missed coaching. I missed that day-to-day interaction. So it was hard. And then also with operations for me, the beautiful side of that was I really got to learn the ins and outs and the behind the scenes
Right.
things that go into running a program. So doing that for 4 years. And then at the same time, the sprints coach at Arizona, her name was Dawn Boxley. She was
Mhm.
an athlete there. She had competed for Coach Harvey.
Right.
And she had two little ones, and she decided that, she would rather move into something that would allow her to be able to be there for her kids. And
Right.
so Coach and I had a conversation. And so literally her and I just flip-flopped roles.
Oh,
So
is that right?
yeah, so she became operations and then I moved in back into the coaching room.
Oh, wow.
And Coach Harvey said it, he's like, you're a coach. Like that's just you. It's who
Yeah.
you are. I get the operations piece, but this is you. So it's just, it's all kind of fallen in place how it's supposed to. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, in that moment it was a no-brainer for me.
So you did 4 years of director of operation. Do you ever, you've heard the term, when you learn how to ride a bike, you never forget how to ride that bike. And that's kind of true in the sense of like, okay, sure, I know how to ride it. Like right now, I haven't been on a bike, I don't know, God knows how long. And I'm sure
Right.
I could ride a bike, but it would be a little awkward, right? Like I'd kind of have to figure out the balance again and all that kind of stuff. How did you so you did 4 years of non-coaching, and
Yeah.
I know you went to the track and you went to the meets, and so you still see you don't forget what long jumping is and what sprinting is, but you're not in the day-to-day writing workouts, engaging in feedback with the athlete and changing up here and there and looking at their technique, things like that. How did you, I'm gonna say, stay sharp so that when you got back into coaching in that fifth year, like was it awkward? Like did you go and like, oh, okay, I gotta figure out a whole week's worth of work or whatever? Like I just
Oh,
I haven't coached in 20 years, and I think if someone put me on the track today to coach, I could probably I still remember a lot of things, but I hadn't been in that routine. It would take me a little bit of adjustment.
no, not so much. I kept really good. I write everything down. I
Oh,
kept my
right.
training plan that
Right.
I did while I was at Washington State. And so, I was really able to kind of come back to that from
Mm,
the X's and O's standpoint. But you are learning a different athlete. You are in a different space, with different resources. And so I did have to kind of make those changes a little bit
yeah.
from switching over. Probably the biggest thing for me was there were some athletes that were there that now they kind of had to see me in a different role. So I had to kind of come back
Oh
to,
yeah, you're the director of ops. What do you mean you're
yeah,
telling me how to run fast?
right. But they
Yeah.
knew my background, I did have relationships with them.
Right.
And so I just, I set up individual meetings and kind of went from there and just tried to navigate that piece of it. But it really wasn't too hard for me in that regard. I think
Yeah.
that I handled that pretty well. It's just getting different, used to a different athlete.
Mhm.
And then, you obviously have a different boss. And so, you have to kind of get used to, yeah, Coach Harvey oversaw what I did from operations standpoint, but now being more in that coaching role and him before with the sprints, he kind of did both. And so then he kind of really handed me all of the sprints and he really just mainly did the hurdles. And
Mhm.
so, just kind of learning some of those dynamics. But yeah, I didn't think it was too challenging from that perspective.
I've gotten to know Fred over the years and absolutely adore him, actually. I really do love him. And I think he's a really good guy. So, but I know things can still happen. And boy, it sounds like I'm leading up to something really bad. I'm not. What I'm wondering is, yeah, felt like that was a little ominous. What I'm wondering is, he sees you in this role, and you're a very competent person. So you're doing a great job in this director of ops role. And now the next day, after 4 years, now you're a coach. Did you guys have to learn how to operate a little bit differently? Meaning, hey, Francesca, how's our buses looking for this season? Well, that's no longer your purview. That's Coach Boxley's. Was there a
Yeah.
little, or did it just fall seamlessly into it?
I feel like it felt
Roles.
pretty smoothly. There were some areas that I held on actually as ops. Like I still ran all of our home meets.
Mm,
I didn't hand that over. I still handled all of our equipment.
hmm.
Um, so I didn't hand those pieces over, but I was okay handing over all the travel aspects
Sure.
and getting that piece of it off my plate. But we communicated pretty well, and I think from that standpoint, that part of it wasn't too hard. I think it's just was more the challenges of having the conversations of, are the hurdle sprinklers running together? Are they not? And kind of going through some of those different
Sure.
aspects from a training piece.
Yeah.
But he gave me autonomy to do what I wanted to do from a training aspect, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah.
That's how you learn to be a better coach is, being able to go through the trial and error of all the different things that you want to implement within
Yeah.
your training and so having that ability, that was probably the piece of it that we had to balance the most. But
Hmm.
but yeah, I think it was pretty seamless.
Yeah, good. So 21 years at the University of Arizona. You really grew up during this time. I mean, that's 2 decades. That's how long I've been at Gill almost. So that's a long time, and how you change from day one to where your last day.
Yeah, and I think even as a young coach, I my first couple years there transitioned into coaching and I kind of did a lot. Like meaning I was also working with USA Track and Field a lot. In '09 was my first USA team that I was on. I was actually the men's sprint coach on that team. So I had just become switched over and just coaching the sprints at Arizona. Now I'm the men's sprint coach for Team USA, and we went to Trinidad and Tobago, and great team, great trip. Had some really, really good athletes. And then from there, I ended up being more also on the administrative side with USA Track and Field of being head manager
Right.
for a few teams there with the World Championships in Beijing and uh, Russia, Moscow were the two, 13 and 15, I think 2013 and 2015. But with that being said, I was balancing that piece
Right.
as well as the coaching piece. So
Did you
so
did you ever have to like pinch yourself? This little girl grows up, pretty
all the time.
normal in Eastern Washington, and and you're going to Russia and Trinidad and U.S. try. I mean, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at all the places that this sport has taken me, I can only be thankful, and really looking at the opportunities
It's amazing.
that I've had. And
Yeah.
there's a few other places in there, 96, that same year, my freshman year in college, was my first USA team as an athlete is in Australia. And so going there, yeah, with my teammate Ian Waltz, was
Oh,
on that team as a
yeah, that's
thrower.
right. Yeah.
And so like, yeah, I mean looking back is pretty crazy the places the sport has taken me.
Yeah.
It's very, very exciting.
I've been working
Sure.
hard at switching words from given to earned. And, a lot of times, and I actually don't remember if you actually use a specific word, but maybe you're thinking that, track has given you a lot of experiences and things like that. It's actually, you've earned
Yeah.
those things, so that's just so cool and neat to see.
Yeah.
Hey, Francesca, in a matter of time, because
Yeah,
we're
I
getting a little
know.
close, but yeah, every time I invite someone onto the show and I tell them, hey, I'm asking for 2 hours, like, I can't do this for 2 hours. Like, boy, it goes quick. Trust me, it goes quick.
You did say that. He was like, it's
Goes
for 5
faster than you think. So
hours.
two topics I want to make sure we touch. The one topic, back in the day, an OG for us here on the Gill Connections podcast, I want to say around episode 50 or so, is good friend Scott Richardson. He's still at Auburn University, not coaching right now, but love Scott, one of my dear friends. And one of the great topics that we had with him is that he's I don't know what you'd call it. He's an adopted family. He's an adopted father. He adopted a child, and I got to know that kid a little bit, and he's such a just a blessing. He's a really cool kid. And it's funny, as we talked about that, your name came up, and you've been public through your social media. You are also an adopted. It's not an adopted mom because you're not adopted. What's it? You've adopted a child?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've adopted four.
Yeah, four. Oh my
Yeah,
God, hold on. I
four.
don't think I knew that. I wasn't keeping count.
Yeah,
I like to shed light on things that are positive. Can you talk to us? So, holy
sure.
cow! First of all,
I
when
know.
you adopt a child, my heart is for you 100%. Four of them, Francesca. First of all, that's just too many kids. Holy cow!
I
Talk to
know.
us about this. What led to the decision to adopt four kids? How in the world do you coach full
Yeah.
time? And you're a head coach now, for crying out loud. Tell us more.
So growing up, I actually wanted 10. I wanted
Wait,
a
wait
family.
a
So let me
minute.
put that out
10,
there. So
10.
four doesn't seem like a lot to me because I wanted 10. But
Wait. How
I'm
many,
not having 10.
you told us about your big brother. How many, but you said siblings,
Yeah, I have an older sister and an older brother. So there's three of us. Mhm.
but you in your head were like, yeah, that's not enough. We should have 10.
Yeah, I wanted a big family. That was something that I always
That's
wanted.
crazy. Okay, keep going.
I know,
Wow.
I know. And I always thought I'd adopt five and have five. But anyway,
Of course
that's
you planned it as
another
well.
bridge.
Love that.
Um, but so that in right around probably 2013, 2015, I actually was just talking about, being a part of those world championship staffs. And
Hmm.
it was right around this time. And one of our athletes that we had on the team during that time, she had graduated, and her and I were pretty close. I grown to be pretty close with her, just through her being on the team. And at any rate, she started working for DCS right when she graduated, and in Tucson. And so I would hear a lot of the stories. And she would, come over, whether it was in tears or happy stories or just telling me about her day. And I just kept thinking to myself at the time, it was just me. I had a 3-bedroom home, and I was like, I wonder if I could ever do that, just provide one of these rooms for a kid. I mean, right now they don't have a place to go. So
Right.
like
Right.
maybe I could do something. So it just kind of, she kept putting these little nuggets in my head. And so then I was like, okay, let me look into it a little bit more. So by the time that was right around 2013, by the time I got to 2015, I had gone fully through the foster process of fostering, of taking the classes and doing the home study and all of that. And I remember it very well. It was Willie Williams in March in 2015. I got the call on my first placement, and I'm at the track, and I'm thinking to myself, what do I do now? Like I did all of this, and like what do I do? And so it's a yeah, interesting process, and in a good way. And I just wanted to help. I wanted to be able to provide help for young kids. And I knew I had to do little babies. That would just be easier for me. And so I thought I'd just keep fostering for a while, and knowing how the system works, that they would kind of come and go, and you just work it out. And so my first placement, I had him for about 4 months. We called him Tank. And Tank went with me at every meet, and we started this chat talking about Lonnie Green. And to this day, Lonnie Green was one of the first ones that saw Tank and asked me about him all the time. And got to hold him. He was a big baby. That's why we called him Tank. And but he went everywhere with me, and it's just, was great. And then after 4 months, he went to his grandpa, and I was like, okay, that was pretty cool. And then in September, I got my next phone call for my next placement, and he was 3 months old at the time, and that's my 10-year-old now. His name is Devin. And so, through that process, he was with me for about 15 months, and then he went home, and then for a couple months, and then ended up coming back. And when he came back, he had a younger brother with him. And then in that time that he was home, I had offered to help another young one. His name was Izzy. Was 6 weeks old, and that's my now 8-year old. And so it just how it worked and how it happened. I didn't know how it was all going to shake down, but yeah, those are my three oldest boys, and they're 10, 8, and 8. And yeah, here we are. They're fully adopted, and yeah, we're
Dude.
life. So it really was more of just creating that life for myself off the track. I think again, as I come back, ever since I was 8, track has been such a huge part of me, and I always wanted a big family, and just how it shook down and worked out. And as I went through all the stages and all of that, I just realized like, okay, I want a family as well, and I think I can do both. And so I did.
First of all, so I did. Yeah, yeah. Of course, you just did, Francesca. It's just your whole life. I just did. Uh, well, first of all, God bless you, because you know, I don't know that it's fair to compare birth children versus adopted children, because they're still children, and that's a very special thing. Um, but we certainly, knowing enough about the foster care situation in our country, we need more people to adopt. There's more children that are willing homes at this point. So to
Sure.
do that, I mean, it's funny. It actually parallels a lot of coaching track and field, right? When we talk a lot about with our coaches, you raise other people's kids,
Yeah.
sometimes to the detriment of your own children. Here you are adopting, children of others to your family. I mean, you talk about what's the definition of selfless? I mean, this seems to be right in line there.
Yeah, and and people ask me like, how do you do it? And I always fear them going back, and you love on them and they go away and they go home, and I'm like, yeah, there is that element of that piece of it, but I just think it's even bigger that if a kid can never know what love felt like,
Oh
that's a
yeah,
little more harder. So for however
yeah,
long you can love on them, I think it's important, even if you have them for a day, they know what love feels like, and I
yeah,
think you put yourself aside, and you should in those moments to be able to do that. And so that's just been something that has been on my heart to do. And
yeah.
does it come with challenges? Absolutely.
Sure.
Is it
Yeah.
hard? 1000%. Is it hard being a working mom? Yes. But especially being here now, my kids can come to the track. They're around sports.
Yeah.
They have the ability to grow up in an environment that is encouraging and can help them become good kids, and good adults. And so yeah, it's challenging, but
Mm.
I would challenge any females out there, any males that question, whether they can do it. You can absolutely do it. It is it hard? Yeah. Does it take a village? It does, but it's very rewarding and it's worth it.
First of all, quick time check because we're at the our schedule time. Are you still
I'm good.
good?
I'm
Okay.
perfect. I'm good.
So how you mentioned it takes a village, so that's might be the answer. Regardless of whether their birth children or adopted children, and honestly, regardless of whether you're a coach, meaning you're not a typical 9 to 5 versus a typical 9 to 5, how have you uh, handled it? And what I mean by that is, because that's not a great way to ask that question, is being a mom is very challenging. Being a coach mom is very challenging in the sense that there are meets you go to that are 4 days long and you're away from the house for 4 days, or God bless, even your home meets, they're, call it 8 to 8, they're 12 hours. And, the kids on your team are demanding, they want to talk to you at 9 o'clock at night. And sometimes you got to recruit at 10 o'clock at night, etc. And yet you still have your child right in front of you that also 100% needs your time, attention, and love. How have you, and because from the outside, you've obviously done it very successfully. You have children that are very healthy and very happy. And also at the same time, you have a career. You had an amazing 20 plus years at the University of Arizona. And now you're a head coach of a Division I big time 4 year school. How what are someone out there may be struggling right now, and they may be, there's different stages. They may be thinking of having children, and but how am I going to be a track coach? Or maybe I can't. Maybe there's thoughts of I can't be a college. I can be a high school teacher and coach, but I could never coach college and be a parent. What's some advice? Things that you've gone through some struggles and achieved through them. What's some advice you have for some people who are contemplating back where you were 8, 9, 10 years ago?
Sure. The biggest thing for me is I don't like the word can't. That for me isn't something that sits well with me. Is it hard? Yes. Is it challenging? Yes. But I believe you should always have a growth mindset, meaning that you can find any solution to any problem if you can. Is it going to be the perfect solution? Maybe not always. But if there is something that you aspire to be or you want to be, the clock's ticking, time's ticking. And so the longer you hold off, the harder that challenge is and the harder it's going to be. And so you just have to figure out within your situation, what are those things that are there that can support you in those decisions that you want to make. If you want to be a mom and you want to coach, you want to work full time, who are those people that you can identify that can help you in that process, and have that conversation with them and see, are they on board with aligning with your goals and what you want, and can they help you in that? And so I've done that a lot. My mom has been the biggest rock for me in that, and so it's being able to identify. She lives here with me
I,
now,
I was
and
going to ask, did she move down?
yeah, she moved with
Oh,
me as well. And so, but aside from her, it's just identifying all those people around, my significant other. There's other people that have really helped in this process of supporting, that I had that conversation with before I even started.
uh,
Um, and then the challenges of the job. Yes, you may have to make sure you have the right boss that allows you to be able to do that. Coach Harvey was very supportive in allowing me to travel them with me. And so I was able to do that. Now, not every boss is that way. And
right.
so that's okay. You just have to find the solution to help you solve whatever the situation is. And so it's not about saying I can't do it because of this. I think that's kind of an excuse sometimes in certain situations that, it's I don't want to do it because of this. If it's something that you desire and you dream about, then let's find a way and try to find the best way. And I've been able to do that with four little ones.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and, and they're good kids. Most people out there know them that have seen them, and I call them the green beans. And then I added a fourth one to it. My daughter's 3. She's the queen of the house, and she's probably going to be the one that gives me the most gray hair. But at the, at the end of the day, I don't regret a second of it. So has it been hard? It has, yes, it really has, whether it's the calls from school or them getting sick or,
Yeah.
all the things that come with having kids. It is having that support system, and you just got to get that put in place the best you can to know it takes a village. It really does.
So someone might be listening right now and they're interested in getting involved in some form or fashion, whether it's foster care or adoption, and maybe there's some other options out there. What's your insight into, like, who should they reach out to? Is there a National Adoption Society? I don't know. Who should they reach out to?
In every state, there is an agency that you can reach out to.
Okay.
I would just encourage you to do that research to look at, where you're at and what those requirements are. Every state's a little bit different in the
Mm,
requirements that are needed to become a foster mom. And then there's an agency that will support you in that process.
mm.
But my email address is on the website,
Mhm.
utepminors.com. Send me an email and I can help you,
Awesome.
if you're interested. But yeah, it just doing the research to figure out where do you start,
Yeah.
and what are the steps into that. And I would encourage anybody who's thinking about it to do it. It's very rewarding.
Awesome. Love that. Okay, let's spend the last few minutes here on UTEP. You still
Okay.
good time wise? Still good?
I'm good. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
All right.
good. I carved even longer than we had planned. So
See, it
good.
goes by fast. I love, I have the same kind of answer, or I'm sorry, question set for every coach when they first become a head coach. So we're just going to rip it
Sure.
right off the band. So is your first head coaching job?
It is.
Now you've had other head coaches, obviously, Lisa, Rick, Fred, etc. And you've certainly have seen other head coaches throughout your career here. What was something that you thought was going to be easy? Because it's different being the head coach.
It is. Mhm.
What did you think becoming the head coach at UTEP? Did you think was going to be easy, and you found out that's a little bit more challenging than I thought? Now, when as I'm gonna talk, let you think about that answer a little bit, because with the head coach we have so many things. Alumni, you may be on committees to hire the next basketball coach at UTEP now. Obviously, scheduling, travel, equipment, recruiting, how you're going to chop up your scholarships, et cetera, et cetera. You have all those things now, and you've had a lot of experience with different aspects. What did you think when you got in there? Like, oh yeah, this won't be that problem. Then you're like, oh wait a minute, I might need to call an advisor, a mentor up here, and get a little bit of help.
Well, I've wanted to be a head coach for a while. I really have, and I was able at Arizona to have the ability. Super thankful to probably have my hands in quite a bit of all the behind the scenes stuff. So I've probably done just about everything within that regard of the ins and outs of the day to day of the sport. Um, and now sitting in the chair, I recall I remember Carol called me from Georgia, and she
Mm-hmm.
said, "All right, Neo, you now have taken the red pill," and so. And so the beautiful part is with that is knowing, the resources that are out there. The challenge for me, again, sometimes I just put my head down and work. It's being able to reach out to those resources that you have, and knowing there's a lot of people who are in this position now and who can help, and so it's relying on them as well, which has been really helpful. To be quite honest with you, the I haven't quite yet experienced
Mm-hmm.
the big challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been thinking about this role for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking about how I would do it if I did it, if I got it. And so now it's just kind of implementing that and putting those things in place. Things have been so good here. Gym Center and then my oversight, Mandy Polito, like they've been wonderful. And so like the differences of yeah, me maybe making some changes and trying to do some things different. That's part of just relationship building. Some of
Mm-hmm.
the that we've talked about already on here is them getting to know me getting to know them, and the differences of how things are done here are going to be different than they were at Arizona, and that's okay. It's just learning that. I hired a pretty young staff, and that was kind of intentional. And so I'm teaching a lot, in a lot of different ways, and but I look at that as all exciting and challenges in a good way. So, like, I wouldn't say like the hardest thing that I'm at home going, oh my God, I have to
Mm-hmm.
deal with this today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the team's been bought in, the athletes are
That's
great,
good.
the staff has been great. Probably the hardest thing for me was moving
Mm-hmm.
after being in a place for so long,
Yeah.
moving everything. I
Well,
got a
well,
lot of stuff.
well, what about let's talk about the staff here a little bit, and not
Sure.
specifically any specific person on the staff, but one of the things, like, I'm amazed. I don't think we do a very good job in general
Mm,
of our head coaches to our assistant coaches of helping them become future head coaches.
yeah.
A lot of our head coaches, they want the control over everything, so they're going to do all the scheduling, blah blah blah, everything, and they don't release some of that power to the assistant coaches. And then when that assistant coach becomes a head coach, they're lost. They didn't
Sure.
realize, oh crap, I gotta, someone's got to schedule all those buses. Someone's got to pick the schedule, blah, 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 blah. Now your career was built on doing a lot of those things. Like
Sure.
you're right on. You've been involved in a lot of those things. But one of those things that you might have been involved, but I don't believe, and you can correct me where I'm wrong here. Uh, is the direct oversight of hiring and evaluation and releasing and things like that. And I don't think there's not a single class we take that tells you how to go hire a staff. This is the first time you've hired a full staff for sure, and maybe one of the first times you've been involved in the whole process. And there's many ways to go about this, right? Do you hire someone who you know implicitly, so maybe I can trust that person, but that person may be harder to release if they're not doing the right job? Do I go with someone who's recommendation? Do I go straight off of resumes and apply? How did you handle that process? You sat down, you had a staff, you had decisions to make about staff. How did you go through that? That seems like that would be maybe a little sometimes overwhelming.
Yeah, and it was initially. I mean, initially it's like, okay, how am I gonna put this together and make it make sense? One of the things I knew I had to have was someone for operations. It was even though I had done it all, I knew it was important to have someone that could handle that day to day.
Right.
And so making sure I had that person put into place that could do both. Here, she also is coaching and is young, and so teaching her both roles is something that I knew was going to be part of the process, but all at the same time fully knowing I knew how I was as that 23-year-old that had to teach. And so that was very exciting for me to know that I could pour that back into someone as well. And so same with my, my throws coach as well. And so when I was looking at it from that perspective, young, vibrant, excited, passionate, willing to work, get your hands dirty, get in and just grind. And so that was what I was looking for when I was building the staff. And I knew that was kind of the basis of what I wanted. And so going through the process, that was what I was looking for. And in those interviews and in those conversations, it's similar to what we had talked about with recruiting, is being honest and being straightforward and saying, this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for, and can you do it?
Right.
So that's kind of how I approached it. And I feel like I've done pretty good.
One of my, I don't know if it's my least favorite website. It's not a fan favorite website of mine, is letsrun.com.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm in a company of a lot of people when I say that. I realize that.
No,
But
you're good.
there is one thread on the message board that actually, I'll be frank with you, every day I check it, and it's the annual coaches, where they're going, who's, what
Yeah.
jobs are open and things like that. While there's some wildly crazy stuff, not only bashing of coaches, which is just idiotic because it's an anonymous message board, but there is a lot of truth in those things. And that's sometimes how I find out about a lot of things, honestly,
Sure.
because you got 1,000 people scouring the internet. So they'll have, the press releases of Francesca getting the job at UTEP or whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But one of the themes in that thread every year is that every job, specifically Division 1, but in their world, it's every job, Division 3, Division 2, doesn't matter. Every job you see posted has already been chosen, that person. That's just the formality, et cetera, et cetera. How much of your staff was um, uh, how much of it was, yeah, I knew when I got a head coaching job, I was going to hire this person. Didn't matter. I told them to apply, but it was already a done deal. I didn't even have to interview them. How much was, I got a stack of resumes because we published that the job was, and I went through them and picked out the top 5, 6, 7, whatever, and interviewed them. And this person stuck out and hired. How much of it was this, the myth that every job is already taken versus how many earned the job because they applied to it in a more traditional sense?
Yeah, you're probably half and half with that. Half I knew already. The young lady I was telling you about before, she was with me at Arizona. She was an athlete there at Arizona and Pima, and young, getting into the coaching piece. And so I already knew she had did some operation stuff for me when I was over there. And so I already kind of knew her. One of my coaches was currently here already. And so what I had to do was fully vet, her background and really learning her and seeing, okay, is this, so she did go through that interview process as well. I treated her the same way I would have anybody else. And then my other coaches went through the resume process, and it was me calling and just having conversations and saying, "Hey, is this something that you'd be interested in?" And trying to get to know them, and then going from there. And so once I really had the conversation with them, and I let them know my vision, my plan. Would they buy into that? That's kind of where it started, and that's what we talked about of them knowing these are my intentions, and kind of going from there. And so it was kind of 50-50,
Yeah, I love that.
a little bit there. And some of the advice I've had along the years, and like I said, even though, yeah, this is my first time sitting in this seat, I've had millions of conversations with different head coaches out there, and I ask those questions like, what is the hardest part, and what is some of those things, so I can always kind of gain that knowledge. And you should always have a list of coaches out there that you would think of,
Right.
like, okay, if something changed. And yes, as I'm grooming this coach to become better, you do have that expectation at some point they're gonna either seek something else, or go somewhere else. And so who would be that next person in line? And you should have kind of an idea of what that looks like. But I'm very happy with my staff. We've been having a great time. We've been grinding,
Awesome.
been working hard these last couple months, and we're ready to get into season. So
I
I'm
love that.
excited to see what happens.
Well, I love that answer because one of the names I almost named the podcast was Mythbusters, and I just love busting myths. I
Yeah.
always talk about the high school coach can't coach college. I love busting that myth. The vast majority, I shouldn't say vast majority, a lot of the coaches, great coaches we've had on this podcast, started out as high school coaches and moved on to college. So I just love busting those kind of myths, and I love busting that myth that every job is already taken. So I love that.
This
Let's,
wasn't. So like
yeah.
I this one wasn't. I mean, if I know we time crunch, so
Mhm.
like, no, don't ever think that.
Yeah.
You should, if you're interested, you got to go through the steps of figuring out how to apply.
Yep.
But you should, and I'm very glad that I did. I'm very glad to be sitting here. And Mythbusters, or the word can't. I don't like,
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly
so
it.
like, if it's something you're never going to be told no, but
That's
I
right.
always tell my athletes, a closed mouth don't get fed.
That's exactly
Don't
it.
ask, or you don't, then you'll never know. So
I love
at
that.
least try.
I love that. Yeah, that should give you hope that if you see a job open, sure, it might already be that person has someone target. But we've had instances. In fact, I'm thinking about Mike Erb when he got the job at Illinois with Tanja Buford Bailey. Tanja, did not know each other at
Yeah,
all. So
exactly.
I love that story.
Yeah, you
Okay, Francesca, let's end this with one of my favorite questions as you are staring into the season of 2025 here. I'm sorry, 2026. I don't even know what year it is. 2026. What has got you excited about your new program there at
know.
UTEP? What's got you excited coming up here?
I just everything. I know that sounds weird, but it's truthful. Like, I literally have been watching these kids grind every single day. They're excited, they're bought in. We talk a lot, like I had talked before, about just being straightforward and honest with them. I told them very clearly where I want to try to take this program. I want us to be one of the top programs in the country. As I said, at the national championships, we're all the same level. It doesn't matter what conference you're in. When we're in Eugene, we are all competing the
That's right.
same. So, I have high ambitions and high expectations for them, and I want to get as many people to the national meet as possible. And so, it comes down to the number one thing that I've worked the hardest at since being here, is just continuing to get the culture of the team where I want it. And they're working hard at it. And that part's been great. And so I'm really, really excited for them to, I always call it a roller coaster ride. When we get started, we're getting on this ride, we're going to buckle up, we're going to have lefts, rights, ups and downs, but we're going to ride it all the way till the end, and see who's still holding on at the end. But ideally, I'm excited for them because they're excited for themselves. And so that's one thing that I'm really looking forward to. I do plan to host 2 home meets. There have been home meets here in the past. This year I'll have a home meet. That's the weekend of March 19th to the 21st. It'll be high school, college home meet combined. So come out, come support, come be a part of it. And then I'll have another meet on April 11th called the Sun City Classic. So I'm really excited about that, about getting the home meets going, and then we're going to look to do some things for cross in the fall. But those are probably two of the biggest things I'm really excited about, and just getting that first season under our belt, and really trying to do everything we can to win a conference title. The program here has the most in program athletic department history with 66 conference titles and 21 national championship titles.
Holy, that's right.
So I got big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
It ain't gonna be easy. There's different ways to get it done. I think I told somebody one time there's 21 events with 39 points total. I think there's 800 and something points available out there
Right.
to win a title with at the national meet. So, it's gonna be a process to get there, but we're gonna work hard at it and do everything we can to get there.
Francesca, I just, hearing your story and, knowing some things, being friends with you, I pictured that old, I think it's an old vaudeville act. You've seen it where they spin the plates, they got eight
Yeah.
things up there and they're spinning the plates and they got to run over here and spin this
Oh
one.
yeah.
That one's wobbling. And I just think about your motherhood, your job, obviously, your friendship, how you mentors that have poured into you. And now I know how you have been mentoring other people as well, take into account Team USA and new job as a head coach. You are spinning a lot of plates and I don't see any of them falling. Now we know behind the scenes, sometimes they wobble,
Oh yeah.
but you're doing an excellent job of leading and leading our young people, and really just so proud of you, man. Really am.
I appreciate you so much. And yes, knowing how far we go back, and just, you giving me this platform to tell my story a little bit, and to share with others. I'm thankful. And anytime anybody thinks they can't do something, I just want them to know they can. Spin those plates. It's okay. And if one drops, it's okay. You just put another plate on there and you keep spinning.
That's it.
And that's just part of it. And it's not meant to be easy, but it makes you stronger and better for it.
That's it.
And so I would encourage anybody to take on those challenges as they come. It's part of the life process, and how you stand back up is what builds character, and so it's having that growth mindset and just continuing to work toward the future. That's just how I roll.
Yeah, well, you're a great example of that. That's for sure. And I'm excited. It's interesting how much you talked about building the culture. That's the hardest thing to build. It's the easiest thing to destroy, by the way, but it's the hardest things to build. It'll be interesting to kind of check in with you after your first year and how
Yeah.
much did you get done that I know you want to get this much done, but it's a
Yeah.
year. And so you only
I
get this
know.
much done,
I
and how
know.
much, what happens in year two and year three as you continue to build there. It'll be a lot of fun to be able to watch from the sidelines
Yeah. Some
as
people
that happens.
call me greedy green, and I do. I tend to I want it now, but I know it's a process. I mean,
Yeah,
that's something that we're just going to keep working, and providing those opportunities for the right people. And you're right, culture can change really quick if you don't have the right people a part of it, and so
right.
you got to kind of stay on top of that. But yeah, I know it's a process. I know it's going to be a process. It ain't going to happen overnight. And having the support from administration, all the way down to the athletes, and your support staff, from
Yeah,
the athletic trainers to strength and conditioning. I mean, especially here, it's been fantastic. And so all of those people are gonna also help support you every day, and make sure you're able to get it done. So I'm gonna just keep working at it. And you're right. And we'll see where we're at the end of the year, and
that's
then
right.
reset and get ready for the next one.
And do it all over again. That's
All over
exactly it.
again.
Francesca, thank you again so much. One of the most valuable things you can give me is your time. And, I asked for 2 hours. You gave me two, almost and a half hours, for crying out loud. So just grateful for you. You said that I've given you this platform. Again, you earned this platform. More people need to know your story.
I'm gonna use that more. I do like that you said that. I need to
Mhm.
get better at saying that, but
and
you're
and
correct.
And I'm humbled that you allow me to help share that story with the listeners out there, because I think it's important. I think there's a lot of people that's going to hear your story, and it's going to give hope and commitment and encouragement to what they're
Yeah.
doing. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you guys.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
guys for being here, man. Again, I told you this is going to be a fun one. It's a great person who, thank God she chose coaching. She could have done a lot of other amazing things out there. So I'm really happy she's pouring into our young people out there on a daily basis. So thanks again for being here in season 7. Lord willing, we'll go to season 17 one day. Who knows? But check us out next week. We'll do it all over again. Thanks, guys.